I'll call the meeting to order at 6:09 p.m. A brief note about meeting logistics. Anyone who's participating remotely, we would ask you to change your name display on your screen to your first and last name so we know who we're talking to and who's talking to us. When you speak, please start by stating your name and where you live. We ask you to keep your comments or questions to under 3 minutes. And if you're speaking about a specific agenda item, please keep your comments germane to the topic at hand. Anyone who wishes to address the council must be called upon by the mayor. Once you're called on, you may make a statement or ask questions, but if you have multiple questions, please ask them all consecutively, as the council generally does not allow back and forth comments or questions. If you speak out of turn, discuss non-germane topics, go on too long, etc., you may be interrupted and asked to adjust your comments or behavior. First item is to approve the agenda. Is everybody satisfied with the agenda?
Actually, I wanted to note, I think there's a typo in the item J, which has the completion date of the East State Street contract listed as this past June.
Okay, we will take up the consent agenda and any changes.
Oh, the main agenda, okay.
Just the main agenda, yep. Adrian.
I'd like to add an agenda item. I'd like to add an agenda item for the city council for me to make a motion for the city council to go into executive session tonight to discuss the renewal of the city manager's contract.
Is there a second?
I don't think we have to vote on that. Oh.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll add that. Since we're doing that in executive session, we might want to do it at the end. Otherwise, I do think we should do it after budget review, because I know that we have people who were here at the last meeting to talk about the budget, and their endurance was overwhelmed, so that they left before they got to talk to us. So that'll be item 9A or something. All right, next up we have general business and appearances. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is not on tonight's agenda. Again, as with other parts of the agenda, we ask you to keep your comments or questions to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room who would like to address the council? Steve.
Hi, Steve Whitaker. I would alert you that there's a need to take the Country Club Road contract with VHB off the consent agenda for discussion for a number of reasons. The East State reconstruction, I've asked for the backup documents. Mary thought she sent them. She didn't. All I've got is the one sheet, and it merits some discussion related to whether the underground boring of a large sewer line is likely to disrupt utilities, because we don't have a good track record of knowing where our utilities are. The $40,000 contribution to Good Sam also should be discussed in light of their contractual obligations to the state and our chronic negligence on doing productive things with our money. We've already given Good Sam a healthy appropriation this year, and I'm not saying don't. I know we're under time pressure to commit that $40,000, but it could be committed to a bathroom with a shower, which is sorely needed at the Trinity Church if that's going to be the facility. I did speak to the pastor there today by telephone, and there's only one bathroom there, and to put 30, 40, 50 people in there is going to be problematic. And right now our 40,000 would just go to salaries, basically $20,000 a month to babysit the unhoused people, which I think is no fault of theirs. I'll put that. I guess I won't know until after I'm done whether you're going to pull those things off the consent agenda, so I don't know how to pack what I need to pack in here. How would you propose to deal with that?
You've flagged them. We will decide to take them off the consent agenda or not when that comes up.
But then I won't get a chance to comment on them, so I'm trying to fit my comments. The VHB contract.
Let me put it this way. When we get to the consent agenda, I will give you an opportunity to be heard.
All right.
Limited time, but yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the room would like to be heard? Okay. Is there anyone online who, I'm not seeing any hands raised, but I don't always see them. Okay. Not seeing any hands up or online or in the room, so we'll move to the consent agenda. Are there items that we need to remove from the consent agenda?
I wanted to remove the VHB contract just because I was curious about had some questions about the scope of work.
Okay.
And the typo in the East State Street cover.
That's item J.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
we didn't have a contract at the time. I assume the contract's correct, but since this is what we're approving,
Okay.
we should change that.
Any other requests to take items off the consent? All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, excluding items F and J?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Are you going to allow me to discuss the warming shelter?
Oh, that's not one of the ones we took off. So which,
It's K.
okay. Okay, yes, we can, I'll take a couple of minutes from you on that.
As background, Good Samaritan entered a contract with the state to create a shelter, which they did at our facility up at the Country Club Road. That came with the obligation to provide day space for folks so they're not left outside during the day. That has been limited and subject to volunteers being done at Christ Church after 8 in the morning, and it's in effect become meshed or overlapped with the community lunches. The community lunches have a diverse group of people that are not all unhoused. Some are elderly, some just need to see somebody during the day, et cetera. And yet the concentration of folks and the let's say, challenging mental stresses of living outside has caused fights, lots of animals in what's in effect a restaurant for health department rules. It's a real mess. What they're proposing here is to allow Good Samaritan to meet its obligation with the state for a day shelter by providing staff to support the volunteers at the churches who are not at all prepared to handle these fights and these people cussing them out and throwing their garbage around, and it's a mess. It's a real mess. A few bad actors, mostly good-natured people, but the volunteers who offer to serve lunches were not equipped and prepared. So they're more than willing and even enthusiastic about having Good Sam, who's trained in dealing with these folks, back them up in handling the troubles. The problem is Good Sam is already under contract, does not need our $40,000 to meet that. And if you read the budget, it was created by a Good Samaritan staffer, which I have told you many times should not be chairing our task force, and was presented as a fait accompli for a rubber stamp from the task force, and they got it. And now our $40,000 would be better spent if it were directed to be used for a bathroom with a shower at the Trinity Church. The proposal is to move the meals from Christ Church at the end of this year, at the end of this month. But yet we've heard that Trinity Church won't be ready until at least the end of January. So it'll continue at Christ Church for the month, which also presents an opportunity to get a bathroom installed over at Trinity Church. Then the whole operation will move over there. And a bathroom with a shower and maybe laundry hookups, I'm not suggesting we buy machines, is a better use of our $40,000, $41,000, than to just piss it away in what I characterize as babysitters for the unhoused.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We have a motion before us to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion, or does what we've just heard give anyone any pause? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. With regard to the consent agenda, I just wanted to mention one thing, that item E, the street closure application, it was a proposal for a street closure. Our staff recommendations were for saying, don't do it on the street, do it on the sidewalk, and the organizers of that event are okay with that. So that, I checked with the city manager, and that's why we didn't pull it off. Item F, Country Club Road contract. Who wants to start?
I just wanted to clarify what the scope of work is. It seemed to me that there was going to be a topographical study of more or less the entire parcel as outlined in the map that was shown, the yellow outline, but that almost all of the other work, virtually all of the other work, other than the LIDAR topography, was confined to an area between the existing building and essentially the roundabout down on Route 2. Is that in fact the case?
Josh, just on time.
Do you need to be caught up, or you don't know what we're talking about?
VHB contract, scope of work.
Yeah, and so the question was why the perimeter is the way it is?
No, is in fact that the case?
And Josh,
Is
why
it
don't you
being-
say who you are first? But
Josh Jerome, Planning Department.
Is it being confined to the area from the roundabout along Route 2 and up the access road to the building, talking about existing conditions and so on, and then that's the bulk of the work. I think 5 of the 6 tasks are
Right.
focused there, and then 1 is a topographical study of the rest of the parcel.
Right, and that map is delineated with the yellow border in the contract for the LiDAR survey.
Right, right. And the infrastructure estimates and design and all of that work is being confined. We're not designing the infrastructure for 300 houses. We're designing
it's
the infrastructure.
Route 2, along
Upgrading.
Route 2 from the pump station up Country Club Road to the site.
Okay, yeah.
So this is road and utility engineering for access to the site.
Yeah, it's a utility survey in order to do the water and sewer designs to replace everything.
Gotcha. Any other, go ahead, Tim.
Also, within the scope, I noticed some language about the track crossing, just in terms of, how that's going to impact a potential project. How far are they going to go with that piece?
Well, I mean, any sort of modifications that might be made, like they want to get conversations happening with VTrans to figure out what they're amenable to. So any modifications, I think the contract says 30% design on that. Right. I think, if I remember correctly.
Is the same true of the intersection just below with Route 2? Are they doing any kind of study on viability of that intersection to accept?
I think they're going to look at it, but they're not going, that's not the biggest concern, because it's a matter of like units will trip a signalization there so that they can look at it, but we don't know how many units are going to be going up there quite yet. So I think that's a process that can happen, but not right now during this contract, and it can happen in subsequent projects or work, like the DOT RAISE grant that we are developing to apply for. That would be included in that. Yep.
Go ahead, Sal.
The report from VHB will be part of the capital plan for the growth center, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions or discussion about this one? Steve?
Yeah, I want to caution that if this is only water and sewer up to the buildings, to the site, it's not going to design or cost estimate the water and sewer for the entire growth center, and it will not serve to support our growth center application. And you can't put in a growth center application and say, we're going to only propose a third of it. We're only going to meet the requirements a third of the way. We'll have to have designed and budgeted and accepted capital budget and program, which is a 5-year capital budget for the roads, the streets, the sidewalks, the water, the sewer, transportation infrastructure, civic infrastructure, any city-owned industrial building, or, whatever. So I don't think the scope of this work, I made a public records request today after seeing that there was a scope agreed to a month or two ago, and then when they came back with the price, they started paring it down. I think you might want to wait and look at the original scope and see whether it was more suited to what we need. Clearly, we're going to have to find some more money to get the engineering done, but otherwise, we're not going to get the growth center, we're not going to get the TIF. So I would say now is the time to get VHB and or whomever else on with the proper scope and not delay that, because the clock to September is clicking. As to the intersection, the road, that completing the yes or no, that road is going to support 74 units for a priority housing project, or 200 units as is a goal. Knowing whether that intersection, it's not just a question of signaling, it's a question of federal highway standards for a level entryway onto that. And if it's not going to meet it, that's going to force the other road and all those costs into the public eye and into the council's decision. And I think now is the time to get that question answered. The scope should include a full analysis of various traffic loads and the federal highway standards of whether VTrans is going to allow us to use that as our road in. If we have to go out through Connors and Malone's property to Gallison Hill, that changes the name of the game. That's a whole nother road. If we have to go down to the old Country Club Road and rebuild the bike path and build retaining walls, that's going to change it. If we have to go over to East State, any of those could be $10 million deal breakers. So I think the sooner we know, do not be manipulated into taking this in little bites and hiding the true costs of what we're embarking upon, because you're keeping the public in the dark, and that's not doing your public service.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Certainly makes sense to do all of the engineering when we have the funds and it's appropriate to do it. No one's trying to keep the public in the dark. The goal of this project, of this particular engineering design, as you may recall, was to get the cost of the infrastructure up to the main site. So, and we've been seeking grant funding to actually construct that, or at least have that in place. So when we had a developer, we know that additional infrastructure needs to go in, but we don't know where it's going to go or where those sites are going to go. So there's no sense in having engineering designs until a developer and a housing partner says, here's how we're going to lay out the site, and here's where we need the infrastructure. there's not a growth center application or TIF application in this state that's required fully engineered designs to be approved. You need to have estimates, you need to have layouts. We've got all that, and obviously we need to put more things into the growth center application, but we do not need a full engineered design, particularly since we don't know where the infrastructure will go. What we're trying to do is to get the infrastructure up to the top of the hill, get grant money for that, so that we don't have to use TIF money for that. Any TIF money from new projects can be used to advance the project into the site and all of the things that Steve just mentioned. So I think we're really talking about two different uses of engineering funds here.
Thanks, Bill. Go ahead, Tim.
Something Stephen mentioned, but so the utilities we're bringing up to the top of the hill, that would be with a capacity for the anticipated number of units we're thinking? Correct. That's fine. Okay.
Sal?
I also think there's a streetscape in the scope for the entire entry road, which I imagine will deal with the problem of the crossing.
All right. Are we ready to vote on, or I guess we need to have a motion to approve item F. Lauren?
I move that we approve item F.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. And I should note that I got a note from someone watching at home saying they're having a hard time hearing what people's votes are. So belt it out to the back row. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we've approved the contract with Vanass Hangen Bruslin. Item J, State Street construction contract. I don't recall who pulled that. Was that you too, Sal? Oh, just the date.
I mean,
Okay,
on the cover sheet, that's all. Just
the contract is right.
Record completion 2025.
Correct.
Okay. With that,
Can I speak on that one?
well, we pulled it off for the limited purpose of making sure the date is correct.
But there was nothing, you're approving a contract, a potentially multi-million-dollar contract without any backup materials in the packet. You know, that's what I came in and asked the city manager for today, and Mary thought she sent it to me and didn't. But all there was a cover sheet in the packet. So that the bids were going to be opened on Monday or something, but, you know, you're potentially, normally there's more documents to review and ask questions about than the cover sheet.
Okay, thank you. Point made. Do you want to move this item, Sal, since it was your pull?
Sure, yeah, I'll move to include item J
And is there
as
a
amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. We've completed the consent agenda. Appointments to the Housing Committee. I don't see that we have any, so we can skip that item. Oh,
The agenda I'm looking at.
I didn't see any in my, maybe I was looking at an earlier, or an older version. So we do have people here? Yes. Oh, okay, now I hear. See Dan Wheeler and Sandy Vitzthum. Okay. Do we have a specific number of openings for this? There are two openings?
I think at least two.
Yeah, since they came to us saying they can't fill the seats, and now, all right. And let me see. Are they here online? I don't see Sandy. All right, is there a motion?
Yeah, I move we appoint Dan Wheeler and Sandra Vitztum to the Housing Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Well, great. I'm glad that's there. I'm glad we're getting people. It's very important. Okay, item 7, update on recreation programs.
Chris Hancock, I think, is presenting this.
Hi. You could, well, if you're showing slides, you probably want to be there so you can.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. There are actually 2 of us presenting. It's me with Tristan Cherry, who is joining us remotely. I guess I will be doing most of the talking, but we've been working on this together. I'll introduce myself. I've been a Montpelier resident for about 18 years, going on 19. Raised a couple kids here. Have done quite a bit of recreation here. Took up basketball rather late in life.
Up
Up and down. Okay, thanks. For about half my time here, so something like 9 years, I've been involved in conversations about recreation facility planning. It began when there was some talk of having to sell 55 Barry Street when some of the problems with that building were first emerging. And I joined and became the nominal president of a citizen group called Montpelier Jump and Splash, which did some survey work and also tried to promote and facilitate conversations that led to a feasibility study that was done by Ballard and King about 6 years ago, something like that. Then I joined the Recreation Board, so I've been in a lot of those conversations. So I come to you as somebody who's just been in the loop a fair amount for that time, and have gradually accumulated some sense of what's realistic, what's needed, hoping to be helpful in contributing that. My own background, I work in software development now, but I have a long background in educational research, so I also have an educator's perspective. And Tristan, I think if he speaks, we'll be able to see his face.
Hey, so yeah, hi, I'm Tristan Cherry. So I'm relatively new to town. I've been a resident for just over a year. I'm traveling for the holidays, and I'm just not able to join in person today. So in this process, I see myself as an advocate for growth in Montpelier. And to those ends, I'd like to help provide some actual guidance about what's possible if we decide to proceed with any new investments in a rec facility. So in my professional life, I work in market research consulting, mostly for pretty big transit infrastructure projects. And I really see a need for new vibrancy and growth in the town. So I hope I'm able to use some of this experience to guide and inform our committee, this council, and how we can create some new space. So I won't be saying much in today's meeting. I'm working behind the scenes with Chris and others to help develop some sensible and exciting options for indoor rec. And so I'll be back in the future to share those, but I'll talk a little bit more later.
Great, thanks.
So as you can see, we've titled our, would this be the thing to push? No, oh no, I was going to move that, but let's just leave that there. That's fine. Okay. Well, no, I really need it out of the way. Okay, minimize. Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm trying to go backwards. There we go. So we're titling this A Positive Outlook on Indoor Recreation Facilities. Our message is basically we're in quite a better situation than you might think. We're going to start with some basics, though, which is that indoor recreation facilities are important. I think based on the kind of dialogue that I've heard and listened to in recent years, we really need to revisit that. And then we'll explain to you why we think a good facility solution is much closer than you might think, than I thought. And for those reasons, it's important to continue the planning and development processes that are underway and have been serving us quite well. So important. I don't think I have ever been to a city council meeting where recreation was discussed where I have not heard this opinion. This is Vermont. If you want recreation, just go outside. So with respect, to me, this sounds like the opinion of someone who would benefit from getting out more. I invite this person, and indeed I invite all of us, to come out and take a fresh look at the ways that our fellow citizens engage in community recreation. Go to a high school or middle school sports event. Come and watch the many dedicated pickleball players. See the working people, the busy working people who make time in their day to play a sport that they love. Watch the kids who practice at 6 a.m. because it's the only time the gym is available, or at 8 p.m. for the same reason. So I'm just going to run real fast through a few photos to get us started on a little tour. So yes, recreation can and should happen outside. This is from the summer day camp that the rec department runs. You'll notice, though, that recreation tends to involve equipment, some kind, facilities. This is, by the way, the soccer field on the country club property. What a gorgeous, gorgeous setting. That's a parent volunteer coaching a girls' team back there. There's some boys practicing. Excuse me, being basketball heavy, because that's what I tend to play more. But this, by the way, is the drop-in. This is open gym, and these are just teens dropping in. So the other stuff was organized. This is just when open gym has been a really regular part of our schedule. It's been really an institution and huge for youth in our community. Here are seniors playing pickleball. You can also play, it's a basketball court, but you play soccer there. You play ping pong there. You do taekwondo there. We had a group doing roller derby there. They play floor hockey. We get a lot of use out of this old wood floor. These participants are engaging in experiences that they give them a lot of depth of memory, bonds that they create. You might remember from the news this reunion a couple years ago of the old lunchtime basketball crew, for whom it really felt like kind of a legendary part of their lives. Now, looking at those photos, and I encourage you to go out in the world as well, don't just notice the participants. Do you see the other people? Do you see the camp counselors, the lifeguards, our professional recreation staff, maintenance staff who are facilitating and enabling all this activity? Do you see the parents and everything that they do? The coaches, some of them very dedicated professionals, and many of them volunteers, the teachers, the organizers, the boosters, the clubs, the leagues, and all the community members who give of themselves in support of recreation in our community. Why do they do it? Because it nourishes the people and the community that they love, and because it strengthens us all. And you can go back, say, to the 1940s to a great old book on recreation, community recreation, Butler. And he's got a chapter on outlining the benefits to the community. I'll just try to go through them real fast. Health, mental health, these are things we know. Character development. We certainly understand that our kids develop and learn things through recreation, team sports, but not only team sports, that are really important for their lives. But it's not just the kids, it's us. I'll speak personally to feeling that my character has developed through playing basketball, and I won't name names and embarrass people, but I've seen other people that I play with also grow and develop through their engagement in recreation. Butler talks about crime prevention. Safety is an interesting one that, a dedicated facility is safer. Like, for example, you're going to have fewer bad accidents skateboarding in the skate park than in some unsanctioned location. Or perhaps even a better example is a senior trying to get some exercise by walking, and they fall and injure themselves on the ice because we are not currently providing a track where you can go when the weather warrants it. The community dimensions, community solidarity, something they call morale, democracy, and I avoid going into too much detail on that, but something I would add that I think is related to what they're talking about is resilience. And I actually spoke to the council, 3 years ago, and maybe many of you were not here then, but trying to make the point that when we play sports, when I play basketball, you're learning to get along with people, some of whom you might not like in ordinary life. I mean, many you would, but some you wouldn't, but you figure a way to work it out. And you are gain experience in doing challenging things together and coordinating to do those things. And that's all during fun, but it comes back when a situation is more serious. So all of this is to say, community recreation, and I'm talking about community recreation, not just going for a hike, is something that binds us together, and it's part of the fabric of the life of our community. And it's a very fundamental part of what makes this a good place to live. So here's another common concern that we hear. How can we even talk about new recreation facilities at a time like this? And so, yes, we have some really urgent and pressing problems. We have a housing shortage. We have a homelessness problem. We are in danger of being flooded again. There are serious worries about the state of our infrastructure. And for someone who is deeply involved in one of those issues, recreation can seem like it just doesn't rise to that level. I'm not here to come to talk about recreation by putting down those priorities. For people who are engaged with those, I want to thank them. I'm really glad that somebody's working, that fellow citizens are engaged with those issues because we need to do something about them. So how do you, and maybe recreation doesn't have quite that same feeling of urgency. So how do you make space for it? So I've got like a to-do organizer thing that has a matrix. Maybe you've seen this matrix. I'll just have to tell you a bit about the view there, but people who are watching, can they?
I think I turned it off. Didn't I turn the oven off? Oh, you can turn that off.
Yeah, and we need the oven turned off. Oh, yay. Okay. Right. Okay, well, there's no highlight. All right, that's as low as it goes. All right, we'll live with that. Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, so important and urgent. So I just named a bunch of things that are important and they're urgent. We can't delay. And then some things are urgent, but they're not even important, but they just won't go away. Yeah.
Sorry, we got it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. All right. So what boxes is recreation in? It's important. It's not as urgent. So let's say it goes. Come on. There. Now I will say, in the time that I've been here, it's been inching to the left because the building is in a worse state of repair. We're not ADA compliant, so we're a lawsuit away from having to close it down. And also, we are painfully under capacity. We could be a facility with 3 times as much functional space would be able to meet the needs of the community. And I realize I'm just asserting that to you. You know, I've been in a lot of meetings. That's my sense. We actually are going to try to, I mean, there is some information about this in the market research that's been done in the reports. But Tristan and I, if you guys find it worthwhile to hear our contributions, we would be willing to come back to make take a crack at really documenting how it is that we're below, that our capacity is low. But anyway, so I think you can make a case, it's a respectable case that we have to. I'm sorry. What do you do when something's in this box? You still try to move it along. You don't move it along as fast as the stuff in the top left, but you try to advance it as best you can. Maybe you take smaller steps. The one thing you don't do is you don't go backwards and you don't give up on your commitment, which is part of what seems to be potentially at stake with selling the current sale that's being considered to the hub. We'll come back to that. But it's still something to try to do as best you can to fit it in with the long view in mind. All right. That's a respectable view. That's actually not my view. I would say let's move now because Tristan and I see recreation facilities as potentially central to Montpelier's growth strategy. First of all, I keep saying rec center because I do think in terms of recreation, but a rec center is a community center, and a lot of the same facilities have a lot of other uses that you wouldn't call recreation, and they help us do our business. A rec center helps us attract and retain residents. It's without doubt a major factor that families consider when if they want to move here, and that plays in here. It's really an anchor for housing development. Very specifically, the city is busy making plans for a housing development on the top of that hill. What developer is going to invest in that? Imagine trying to make that pitch to them, either with or without the guarantee that a recreation center is going to be there. Of course, if a recreation center is going to be there, that's a much more attractive and reliable prospect to build housing. And so I actually think that would be a key that's kind of unlock that process to go forward. So we think that you could move fast, or at least at a medium speed, because a rec center can help our town get our mojo back. All right, one more third and final concern that I hear expressed. We don't need a fancy new recreation building. I've had people tell me this. And this is especially of a concern because obviously we're in a very difficult budget time for the town. But not only that, there have been some numbers that have been floating in the public discourse in the last year or two that are really frightening large numbers. And so people are justifiably worried when they hear those numbers. But in response to this, I agree. We do not need a fancy, expensive new recreation building. And if you look at what we do in this town, look at our outdoor pool, look at 55 Barry Street, look at a lot of the facilities we have in this town. We're not given to indulging in fanciness. We have facilities that are basic, they're robust, they have the capacity, they have the function That's all we need to get about our business. And so that's the case here as well. So how do we get new recreation facilities without them being fancy and expensive? So hiding in some recent documents is some very good news on this front. Oh, I went the wrong way. Okay. In the recent report from Power Wellness, they documented the potential for the existing Elks Lodge building to be the foundation for new recreation facilities. The potential use they looked at, and I'm quoting just about verbatim from page 6 of their report. Potential use to renovate the lodge and use it as the new center point for the new community center. They're considered professional opinion. This is a viable option. Why? Okay, first of all, it's on land that the city owns, so that makes all kinds of activity more easy to do and affordable. It's got the best size and floor area. The square footage of that building is equal to the square footage on Berry Street if you count the nasty basement space down there, which is not currently in use and has sort of dubious prospects and would cost a lot to fix up. It's steel frames in good shape, ADA compliance, easy to do. The engineering issues are not a problem. It's high above the flood zones. There's another good thing about it. Ability to increase the footprint where needed. We'll talk about that in a minute. And something I think they forgot to add, it connects to outdoor facilities. So that beautiful field that you saw, actually there were a couple of those photos from up there. Imagine us being able to have the rec department offices right there. It's an efficiency for one thing, and just to have staff able to access facilities. But there's also other kinds of synergies for patrons as well. So it's just a fabulous site. Okay, obvious question. You can't play basketball in the Elks Lodge. So what are we going to do about that, Tristan? Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, great. Sorry. Yeah, so just a small preview with where we're going with this. I've been looking into various options to best fit Montpelier's circumstances. And what I think is a sports barn type athletic facility that really provides the type of no-frills space that wouldn't end up costing probably much more than it would take to retrofit or renovate the Berry's relocation, and it would offer way more functionality. So these facilities they're low cost, they're modular, they're relatively quick to construct. The buildings themselves are basically manufactured. I mean, they're pretty cost effective and they're efficient to maintain, operate, and they provide year-round court space as well as the indoor field and fitness activities. So I see this as like a really good complement to what is already there at the Elks Club structure. So you don't need to take my word for it. I've been in conversations with a few consultants and builders, and they've been able to point me to some pretty great examples of similar sized towns where these facilities have been constructed and successfully operate. You want to go to the next slide there, Chris?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I have to click.
So this just includes in Saco, Maine, it's about 20,000 people. This is a 40,000 square foot field house space, accommodates youth and adult leagues, different sports, as well as rentals. Next slide. This is in Nona, Florida. They partnered with the same design and build firm. They have a 46,000 square foot space with multifunctional sports surfaces, pickleball, basketball, tennis, turf. The facility also generates some revenue with holiday and summer camps and party rentals. So my point here is that these buildings are achievable. The per square foot cost are even lower than I expected, and they meet a real demand. And I think they can be built for a lot less than some of the numbers that I heard when I first came on the Recreation Committee. And I'll just finish up by saying that I'll be preparing some more analysis on the subject for a future presentation. So if you're interested to hear more, I would like to come back. So thanks.
Yeah, we don't yet have information that's solid enough to say a number. A lot of these seem to be in like the 5 to 15 million range. Might be a bit more, we might be near the higher end of that range with the challenges of building in Vermont. But what is maybe worth comparing it to is the estimate that we had run a couple times to renovate 55 Barry Street, update it, and use all of the square footage that's there, and that's 8 million. And if you're going to spend money in that ballpark, we can get so much more bang for something in that ballpark. Don't know. We don't have a number yet. We could work on getting one if people are interested. So how would it look at on our site? So here we are. This is the building that we have, the Elks Club, the Elks Lodge, as they call it. And you could put next to it a barn. This one here is smaller than the ones that Tristan showed. And then the typical technique here is you put kind of a you enclose an in-between space so that in any weather, you could change in the locker room in one building, go play in the other building, go back and forth real easy, and can be a nice sort of atrium space. And how would you use it? Well, the Elks Lodge can be carved up into about 6 spaces, where you could have one of which could be a studio with yoga and all the other kinds of things you do, studio taekwondo, for example, or childcare that already exists, is substantially built out. And that's a very important function in the community center there. You could have an after-school center / teen drop-in center. You can have a meeting room. There's even room to have sort of a meeting room with some breakout spaces, so you could have some highly functional meetings there. Changing in locker rooms, if you put them there, then you don't have to have them in the big building. Keep the big building simple. The rec department could put offices there. So that would be one way that you might use that central building. And then what would you do in the barn? So about half of it, you'd put a wood floor on which you'd have room for 2 basketball courts, and even some room for a little bit of stands, so that at least parents can watch their kids play in a game, which they cannot even do at Barry Street. You can't really host a competitive game. But here with 2, you could host some tournaments even. You get some revenue that way. But it wouldn't just be basketball. It's a wood surface. So everything that we do in Barry Street, pickleball, of course, badminton, dodgeball, soccer, floor hockey, ping pong, all that goes there. Then you have another space where you've got artificial turf enclosed by a running track, which is about half the length of a normal competitive running track, which is enough to do serious practice if you're like a high school athlete or something. But the big attraction for us is the walking function for people who need a place to walk. We don't. I mean, what we have right now, people go to the mall, is what they do. Or they go outside when they maybe shouldn't. And then, so on the turf, youth soccer practice, it's not a big fancy field. I mean, some people have said, how could you have such a small field? But for kids, tremendously valuable. And these are the kids right now who are staying up till 8 o'clock to start a practice at Green Mountain Community Fitness, and they're going onto a floor that is hurting them because it's too hard. So that's a big need right there. So where are we? What we're saying here is that logistically and even financially, this is a vision to which we are much closer than you might have thought, to having a highly functional recreation facility that is going to see us for the present and the future with expandability as well. But let's think of it from the point of view of process. This is one way of kind of carving up, the steps that you go through in order to, this poor, okay. When a city wants to build a rec facility, these are some of the standard steps that you go through. And some people who care about recreation that I know, I might even sometimes have been one, get discouraged because it seems like we just go around in circles. We keep talking about recreation, and here we are again talking about recreation. We were doing this 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But if you look at this, you realize actually we've made a lot of progress. Preliminary feasibility assessment, I mean, we've preliminary feasibility assessed up the wazoo. We have the Ballard and King report from 5 years ago. We have the new report from Power Wellness. And so we have a pretty good sense of what the community needs and of the ability for operating revenue to largely offset operating costs. That's one of the key feasibility questions. Community engagement surveys, we've done quite a few. I think we have more to do on community engagement. I do not want to claim that is done, but we've definitely worked on it. Feasibility study, Power Wellness is proposing to do a follow-up study where they'll get into more detail, but we've looked at quite a bit of detail. Site selection. Now, opinions vary. Not everyone is on board, but in fact, last year, the council adopted the action plan from White and Burke that included planning for development up there with housing and recreation. Yeah, okay. So I don't know the details about that. There was an action plan. There was an adoption.
That's okay. You have the floor.
Yeah. So we haven't maybe checked the final box on site selection, but really, folks, you're never going to find a better site than this. And the other thing about site selection is it is so advantageous to have a site. I know this because when we went through the planning with Ken Ballard and we had meetings, always the first question is, well, where is this recreation center going to be? And Ken would say, well, now you have to do this in the right order. First, you have to check about the operating expenses and the functions, and it was all very abstract. And we just lost people there. You know, they just couldn't really picture it. And so now we have not only something that you can picture, but something that has advantages that you would just never find again. And then there's more steps to do. I'll just note that for construction, if you take this plan seriously, half of it is done. We have one of the two buildings that we need. It is, in fact, the more complicated, the more expensive building to build. And so it would just be folly to give it up and to give up that option now. And I know you folks may, or I think you may be looking at a recent appraisal. I don't know what number you're looking at. It's 600,000 was offered. Maybe you could get more. This building is worth, whatever the appraisal says, this building is almost priceless to this community. It's worth more than 600,000. It's worth more than 10 times that if you think what it would cost to build another building like that in a location like that. So we are halfway there on the construction. So that's our message. Again, recreation important. We're closer than you think. And let's stay the course. And thank you so much for putting up with this long presentation. I know you got a ton to do. Just felt that it was very important to get this on the record at this moment.
Thanks for coming in. I can assure you that you're not the only one who's found the technology of doing the PowerPoint while you're also trying to talk to be kind of a challenge. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts? So let me just, so your basic premise is that before we go to selling off part of the parcel, which is certainly not on the agenda for tonight, we should pause and consider whether we can use the existing building and the land as the beginning of our new recreation center. Is that a fair summary?
Indeed, yeah. And just to, as an adjunct to that, I'll note, it is probably not your last opportunity to sell that if indeed that's what you want to do. You know, I'll never be arguing for it, but you could do it in a couple of years or whatever. It's an opportunity that would be, whereas if you sell it, I think it's very hard to get that opportunity back.
Okay, thanks. Anybody have any questions they want to raise at this stage? Tim?
Clarifying structure, so you're not the rec department, you're not a committee, you're just a separate committee, but you're not really with the hub either, so you're a third entity?
I was on a third entity called Montpelier Jump and Splash. That disbanded after a while.
Yeah.
We kind of ran our course. I am now a member of the Recreation Advisory Board, which is,
Part of the rec department then?
which is connected to the rec department.
Okay.
I don't have any authority, but we opted to come before you as citizens. We're not trying to disguise the fact that we're plugged into various conversations. We hear a lot of people. We know some of the thinking of the rec department staff and the city because by virtue of being on that board. But we didn't want to claim that we're speaking for the department.
Adrian?
Just a quick question, and maybe I should know this, but what is currently happening at the building at Country Club Road? Is there an opportunity to move the rec department up there and start doing some of those activities now, or what is that plan, or is it just vacant? I'm not sure. I don't
There are some non-recreational uses. People were talking about the shelter, but that's only part of the building. And yes, the rec department is trying to make use of it to the extent possible. Arnie can speak to more of it. Things that I've heard of are they're just starting a new so-called fun space so it's just a carpeted, warm area where kids can come and run around in the wintertime. I don't know the exact plans for that, but that's one thing. And certain kinds of classes have also been held up there. And I think that's one important strategic thing for us to try to do is just try and make more and more use of it. What works against that is the rec department with the current budget freeze is down one staff position, and so the rec department is unable to have a staffer on site all the time. So you have to kind of deal with that. It limits what you can do, but it doesn't mean you can't do anything.
Tim, you have something else?
Just trying to piece all this together. So when we've also got the hub group had asked us for an answer by December 31st on their offer, and if we even want to parcel out and sell part of the property. So, and we're not meeting again before the first of the year. So I think we need to do some.
I did, just to that, not to sidetrack where you're going, but I did have contact with Steve Ribbley, and he did say that he would extend the offer if we went beyond December 31. And I think one of the questions for the council would be if you chose to go for sale, would you just make a direct sale or would you put out for proposals anyway, which would...
We decided to go RFP
Right,
last
so,
time,
right, so I think their deadline for sale wouldn't really be
That's
that...
their deadline, not
Right,
ours.
right, exactly.
Okay.
One of the things that I was thinking about, these buildings look cool, and I've been in some of them. And obviously, it looks like a pretty affordable way to enclose a pretty good amount of indoor space. But I'm curious if you know how long a building like this lasts. I don't think it's going to be standing for the amount of time that 55 Barry Street has been standing. On the other hand, 55 Barry Street is also needs millions of dollars put into it. So,
Tristan, do you want to address that?
No, I haven't thought about building longevity, but I mean,
It's something we should
30,
look
40
into.
years doesn't seem unreasonable to me, but I can ask around.
I mean, one of the ones we showed is 10 years old. The one at Norwich University is 30 years old? It's over 35. Is over 35 years old.
Oh,
I mean, it's pretty simple construction. Steel holds up pretty well, but I think it's an important question. It is part of what we have to really understand better.
One more question. So, I mean, just thinking about recreation and the Country Club Road and coming up with the master plan of how we're going to use that site. So this is part of that complex equation and the timeline of, you know, what comes first and, you know, recreation, housing. It's, you know, in my mind, it's all kind of confusing into like what is that final master plan that the community wants to ensure that we design that site appropriately. And I don't know if our community, I mean, you know that I'm a big fan of recreation. That is my thing. But as we go into budget season and looking at the budget, I don't think our community is gonna have any appetite to fund or bond for a recreation facility like that. And so, not to squash it, but because I think this is a good avenue to go. But what I would like to see the group explore is economic development opportunities and partnerships. I really truly believe in partnerships. I mean, the hub put together a proposal. I mean, is there an opportunity to work with that entity or find another entity? I mean, there are businesses out there that I truly believe that we could recruit to Montpelier and work to, you know, have a private business up there, maybe partner with the rec. I don't know what it would look like, but I just don't think our community would be able to afford this anytime soon when we're in such a budget crisis. But I want it to move forward, but how do you do that? I think we have to be very creative in how we work with private businesses to ensure that we can bring something like that to Montpelier, because I don't think our taxpayers are going to pay for it.
I think that's more an observation. No one expects you to have the answer to that.
Yeah, just thinking about it,
Yeah.
that's all.
Anybody else? All right, thanks for coming in. I know you put a lot of time into, oh, we've got a question. Come on up, Nat.
For me, or a separate?
Why don't you stay? There may be a question coming here.
I just want to say a couple things
And
in
start out by introducing
3 minutes
yourself.
or less.
Yeah, we know who you are, but why don't you start out by introducing yourself?
I'm Nat Winthrop, 43-year resident of Montpelier and vice chair of the hub. Chris, I missed your introduction, but I was kind of floored that I didn't hear any mention of the hub, where we've been talking to both the council and the City Hall staff for literally more than 3 years. It was the city that originally proposed a public nonprofit partnership with us. And we drew up a list of recreational opportunities that the hub could offer versus the city. We always saw it as synergetic and complementary. And I think all of you on the council are aware of rendering and other plans that we offered some 2+ years ago. You weren't on the...
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. We were originally on the agenda for tonight, I understand, with the budget quandary that you're facing, why we're not. And we look forward to making our presentation, I hope, on January 8th. We ideally would like to see Steve Ribellini and our group purchase the whole clubhouse building, but we're open to sharing it with the city, to just purchasing half of it. We've been talking all along about including a daycare center there, possibly a teen center, and it's just beyond ironic that at the 11th and a half hour, the rec committee, the rec advisory board, who I attended several of their meetings, are proposing putting up a sports barn, which is what we've been proposing for 3 years, in the exact same footprint as our proposal.
I should clarify that this is not a proposal by the Recreation Advisory Board. This is this is, I would say, a presentation by two members of the public who believe they have information and ideas about a direction we could go in. But I don't think they're saying that they propose to set themselves up as something in competition with the hub. They're just saying if the city continued to own it, this is the way the city could go. Do I have that right?
I have heard some. I really would like to hear more. And I actually tried to talk with you a couple of years ago, and I would still love to, and to talk with more hub members to figure it out. I think it is, I mean, the hub has already done the city a huge service by identifying that site and kind of bringing it into play. And I also appreciate that the hub has had, since then, a disappointing time in seeing the planning get caught up in this bigger process. I mean, to cut to the bottom line, I would be very supportive of a tennis barn, a hub built and managed tennis barn attached to this complex. But I think that a lot of the conversation about working with the hub has been afflicted with unclarity. I know you're going to disagree with this, and let's follow up later. But I think there's been a lot of unclarity about the expertise of the hub, the core mission and purpose of the hub, and the capability of the hub. And I think if we look at those a little more squarely, we'll be able to find what they call a right relationship. And part of that right relationship, in my strong view, is that that building is the center of a recreational complex that needs to be wholly, that is a municipal responsibility. Recreation management is a profession, okay, and we are lucky to have professionals who do it. They have training, they have know-how, and they have professional accountability that you're not going to find in a private partnership of that kind. And there really hasn't been any demonstration of that capability, accountability, and commitment from the hub. So let's get the hub doing what they're really good at. And let's talk.
You know, Chris, I think we're at the point where, Nat, I totally understand your point. We've been talking about to you for years, Nat. Chris, I hear where you're coming from. I think there might be a fruitful conversation to be held outside of this room, but I think we should wrap this up and move to our next agenda item at this point.
All I would say is that I've spoken to Steve Ribellini today. I know the new appraisals are in, and the report from the engineer in terms of a possible secondary access road across what is now Steve's 7.5 acre parcel. And he and we are willing to extend his offer, which is negotiable, it always has been, for another month. But I know the budget process won't be over till late January, so I really hope we can make a presentation on January 8th.
Okay, thanks for coming in.
You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Just move on to our agenda. This is, we've got really important things to deal with. This is 45 minutes into a 15-minute agenda item.
I'll be 30 seconds.
this is part of the master planning process, which we have neglected to
Okay.
even get started on.
Thank you, we've heard that, thank you. All right, next up, FEMA flood reconstruction update. Hi, Kelly.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Kelly Murphy, Assistant City Manager. On the line, we've got members from Stevens and Associates. We've got Bob and Diane. I'm going to turn it over to them to do some introductions and talk through the report. Hopefully, everybody has had the chance to take a look at the 30% design report that is available online. Just a few points that I want to make for context is that so to start out, we started with the original damaged inventory at about $11.7 million. The projects that are associated with this design work was originally estimated to be about $6.65 million. So this report and these new cost estimates come in at $16.8 million. And so the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because I want to give you kind of the context for what's in here and what it means in terms of the bottom line for what it will cost local taxpayers. And so just getting into that $16.8 million figure, taking out the $6.65 million, that's about an up of $10.1 million in addition with these new estimates. And so that brings the total damaged inventory, if this work is added, to about $21.8 million. And just to share, our local match is $2.2 million. And so that's about $480,000 that we do from us in match if we had the total sum of all of these projects that we know at this time. These are the best estimates that we have right now, so that could potentially be higher. But we're also working with experts to make sure that we know what those costs are. So for tonight, what we're really looking for is to have a discussion with Stevens and Associates about the 30% design report. If you accept the report, we'll finalize it and put it in front of FEMA. This report is representative of the codes and standards work that needs to be done for this project to advance. From there, we would work with FEMA on that. We are working on a deadline likely to be extended, but the FEMA rule is that we have to submit within 18 months for permanent work. And so that would be a January 2025 deadline. And so that's where we're headed. What we would be proposing is that we would do something called an alternative procedures project, which would give us a lump sum for these projects, and then we could determine how to spend it. We also would then seek probably additional mitigation funds from there. So that's kind of just a thumbnail sketch of the materials. I'm going to turn it over to the experts here. Bob, you want to take it away?
Sure.
Thanks, Kelly.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. And before I forget, I just want to mention that Kelly and her staff have been tremendous to work with. And, every step along the way, they've critically looked at what we've come up with, asked for questions, and really worked collaboratively with us to sort of come up with what we think is a good plan, and a plan that is consistent with the process that we're involved with, which is effectively, getting before FEMA to determine what level of funding you're going to get for this project. So this is what we've titled a 30% design effort. I'll give you a little bit of background of the detail that's involved in that. But the purpose of this is to form an opinion of project cost in order to establish the level of funding you're going to get from FEMA for your insurance and the FEMA grant funds. Once that funding amount is determined, then there'll be a step that comes back and says, with that money, what do we actually go forward to build? And are there different alternatives? And are there other sources of funds? What's in the best interest for the goals and purposes for the city? So the process that we went through since last summer, and it may make sense for me to share the report at some point. So, but maybe I'll talk for a little bit. As I say, we met last summer and identified or reported out on the assessment of the three emergency service, City Hall, the two emergency service buildings, and a number of alternatives And then we met with Guidehouse, which is the agency that's been giving advice and guidance to submit to FEMA, and identified that in order to determine the funding for this, that we needed to identify a solution that is what we call minimum codes and standards. And that's what I'm going to describe to you tonight. I want to say, first of all, it is you could certainly say it is the minimum code requirement to put these buildings into full compliance with floodproofing. It is not by no means a minimum design. So I want to explain more about what I mean with that as we walk through this. So the approach for both the two buildings that are subject to deeper water, which is the City Hall and the fire station, is what we call dry floodproofing. That is essentially, building the walls that are watertight from infiltration during a flood, getting the level of flood elevation high enough, structurally reinforcing those walls if we need to because of those forces, collecting water or depressurizing any uplift and buoyancy, and pumping out any leakage. That's the kind of broad overview of what we mean by dry floodproofing. We use that approach on both the City Hall and the fire station, but there's a couple of things that are covered in this background section in our report that are worth noting. One is that all of your buildings are what we call critical facilities. And as a critical facility, both FEMA requires, it's not a recommendation, they require a higher standard of care, a higher safety factor. So we've used, in this case, a higher design elevation than you would if you were not a critical facility. So we have, again, we designed to something like over 5 feet above the basement floor of City Hall, and roughly the same amount over the fire station floor, which is probably 12 feet higher than the basement in the fire station. In addition to that, in the parlay of FEMA benefit cost analysis for what they decide to fund, your use of building is a different class. So these are, first of all, large mass masonry buildings that are owned by a municipality. So a municipality has a useful life of hundreds of years, unlike a private project, which I might, as a private project, be looking to make sure whatever investment I make, I get a return in a 10-year investment period or a 39-year tax period. As a municipality and as a very robust building, these buildings, whatever investment you make in them to make them resilient to flood forces, is going to be here most likely for generations, and that has a different benefit or a different timeline to amortize those investments, and that is in fact how we come up with this: is it worth the cost? Is the benefit worth the cost? Part of that calculation is the life of the investment. You have a very long investment life. Most projects do not. The third thing that we want to point out, and you all know this, in terms of background, is both the City Hall and the fire station are historic buildings and part of the historic downtown. So they serve a function in the community as part of a district that, if we modify them, we want to do that in a way, I'm sure you and the citizens want to as well, but FEMA recognizes that we should do this in a way that tries to maintain its historic character. And so that factored into this design as well. So let me just go to the City Hall and sort of walk you through what is included in this minimum codes and standards and the cost, the total project cost for that, which is exceeding $11 million at this point for City Hall. So as I mentioned before, dry floodproofing, the first thing we did is look at how do we make the walls of City Hall below the design flood elevation substantially impervious to floodwaters. You've got an old building, a lot of holes in that building, a lot of holes, a lot of pipes that have plumbed in under the slab from old bathrooms that have been retired, and a lot of utilities coming in and out. So we proposed to excavate most of the perimeter of the City Hall and install an exterior membrane against the wall before backfilling to make that watertight while removing utilities, while plugging other holes that are there. We really felt like we couldn't rely on the foundations that were built, 100 and some odd years ago with the penetrations and the unknowns to be substantially impervious. The second element, the design flood elevation is actually above the sills of the windows to the basement. Not by much, about 6 inches. So every one of those windows has an interior flood shield that is permanently affixed on the inside. Outside will look like a historic window. The window might actually be damaged if you get a really high flood, but there's a flood barrier to give us that extra 6 to 12 inches of additional protection on those windows with that flood shield that you would see after this renovation. And then lastly, the slab in the basement of City Hall is excavated, and any remnant or leftover piping removed. The boiler pit is removed. All that mechanical equipment is pulled out. And we put an under slab piping system in to relieve water pressure that's going to come up through, direct that to sump pumps, and then pump it out. That is the sort of standard approach for dry flood proofing. And if all of that works well, that would result in a situation in the next flood where we could be standing in the basement looking out the windows and seeing the water lapping at those shields and see no water or little water leaking in through the sidewalls and hear the sump pumps running. That has worked for other buildings we've designed. That is the basic premise for dry flood proofing. And that is the first layer of flood proofing that's included in this design. And I say first layer because there are additional measures beyond that. So the second layer of protection is that we looked at if in fact there was either leakage, additional leakage that we could not pump out because it was breaking through that perimeter, or for some reason, even with the higher flood elevation, the design flood overtopped that. We moved all of the essential utilities to higher elevations. So the generator is relocated out of the basement to higher land. The fire system, the communication system, the electrical system is all moved up to the upper floor. The only thing that is left in the basement at this point is the boiler system, which is a supplement to the bio district heat. So you have boilers in the basement that are there for emergency backup. They're not normally used, but if in fact the biosystem goes down, these boilers would kick on to provide heat for the district. Those have been lifted up out of the pit. They're elevated. And the same thing with the elevator machine room. We felt like that was high enough off the floor where we could have 3 feet of water in that basement and neither of those utilities would be affected. But they are principally protected just from the initial dry flood proofing. Those are still at risk. But we don't believe that they are essential to your critical use of the City Hall going forward. The third layer of flood mitigation for City Hall was to move all of the essential functions for City Hall out of the basement. So the land records, we have a new vault that's moved to the first floor. The planning department is moved to the first floor. That whole half of the first floor is reconfigured to accommodate some of the critical functions that were down in the basement. The DPW offices wouldn't fit on the first floor for our planning, so those were relocated to the garage at DPW, so they're entirely out of the floodplain. The intent is that, again, if there was a breach and if that basement flooded with all of the measures that we put into that the essential services that the city needs to operate day 2 after the flood are all at higher elevations, and they're all served by utilities that are going to function even if that basement was full of water. And then as part of that third layer, we rebuilt the basement with what we call water-resistant materials. So it is basically washout materials. There are materials that can handle water without having to be excavated and dried out and everything else. And again, these aren't practices that we woke up yesterday and say, oh, we're gonna take this approach. These are all standards of design through FEMA design guidances for how to mitigate for flood. It is built within dry flood proofing standards. It's part of wet flood proofing standards. So they have manuals for here's water resistant materials, how you do that, how you make sure you don't have to, again, you can take a hit and then be back up and running, day 2 without a substantial investment. That's the point. There are non-essential uses that do get relocated back to the basement. So that is your council room has moved down there. We're using that space on the first floor. There's a couple of offices that are being used for other committees or not departments of the city, but I think the downtown organization, a couple of others are down there. There's meeting rooms, there's a kitchen, again, functions where that historic basement can continue to serve the city in future years. But if we were to lose those, the essential critical functions of City Hall could continue on the upper floors. That's the City Hall in essence. All of these buildings, one of the elements of any rebuilding disaster recovery insurance is that when you have an impact like this and you have to rebuild it, you also need to rebuild the components that are substantially improved to today's codes. So you have an older building, that has a lot of asbestos in it. And so we did hire an asbestos consultant and studied that and have an estimate for close to $250,000 of asbestos removal in the basement. We have, Vermont has an energy code that you don't meet. So whatever gets put back together in substantial renovation areas is going to get new insulation and brought up to energy code. It also has a code for fresh air ventilation that you don't meet. So that's included in this number, along with moving air conditioning units to heat pumps instead of window units, because we don't want components in our windows with floods coming in. So there are many split heat pumps included in this design. So those elements qualify for funding through FEMA. And because they are parts of meeting, again, codes, not necessarily the flood codes, but other codes that we're required to come up to standard with. And then there's also a list of ADA improvements. So, so we do have a building that is with, again, to close out the City Hall, that is substantially more resilient, that it has some, several measures of mitigation, that is better in terms of today's codes for energy and ventilation and ADA and asbestos for environmental. It is not a zero risk proposal. And I'll say the same thing when we get to the fire department. We don't have an alternative as we exist within the 100-year floodplain. We are not, we don't have, this alternative does not get you to zero risk. There's always some risk when you are located here, and we're going to continue to use spaces that are below the design flood elevation. And that's, the question is, are we approaching zero risk, and have we, arrived at a way, if we do fund these investments substantially through the FEMA and federal sources, where if you do see a series of floods, which I think you will continue to see, the last substantial flood you had was 10 years ago. If you look at it from 1920s, if you look at this investment that's going to be around for the next 100 years, you could be looking at, half a dozen to 10 additional floods in that time. And, if that occurs, are you going to be up and running the next day? And that's really the goal that we're looking at, that you may evacuate the building during the flood, but day two, people are back in their desks and they're functional.
Okay.
So
Bob, I'm going to ask you to pause now so that people's questions and comments don't get missed. I'll ask right now people from the council have any questions just about City Hall before you move to the next building. Tim.
Oh, thank you. The thoroughness and the detail in your plans is fabulous. I'm embarrassed, though, that I think some of the fundamental concepts of it aren't at all what I thought we were going to see or hear. And for example, the use of the lower level in City Hall for office space. We were talking about filling it at one point and floodproofing and not using it, and now you're going to put people down there. I'm not with you on that. If you say we're going to have another flood in 10 years or so, possibly, this is just too much money to invest, and it's not fair to people. And the offices you're putting down there that, maybe deemed to be not as essential, if you look at what our Montpelier Downtown Alive group did in our last event, they were essential, and they were on the front end of it. And, putting them in the basement like they're not going to matter, it just hits me wrong. So I don't like the plan. Also, the fact that we have upper level space, that I think maybe that was a staff instruction to your company from our end, but there's a large upper level in this building that we can use for high dry office space, and I think we need to consider that as part of this plan and not put people in the basement. I mean, I don't care if the city hall chambers are down there, because it's a light duty thing and we can move, but I also think the move of keeping the boilers down there for the investment it's going to take to move them up 5 feet or whatever it is, and the elevator mechanical systems as well, we've got to find a way to move them up. I know the elevators is a very small thing. I'm moving those up in 3 buildings I own. It's just not that big a deal to move those up and have them high and dry. So that's a few of my points, and I really appreciate your detail, but I also really am disappointed with the outcome that the basement is involved as space that we plan to use.
If I may, just to respond to that, and I think, part of this is the process in order to establish a budget from FEMA. So you're entitled to make a request for funding at this level. This may in fact be more expensive than filling the basement. We haven't studied that at the same level, so I don't think I can say that tonight. But there are legitimately other alternatives that have a different risk profile or less of a risk profile and a different cost. But the exercise of saying, what are you entitled to funding for from FEMA to meet minimum codes and standards was the alternatives that we advanced forward. And you're right. I think, you have a series of value decisions to make about, do you start moving things to the 3rd floor? There's lots of room up there if the city decides that these other uses are more valuable to that. I think what Kelly was saying before, and perhaps we weren't clear about, is your decision as to what you actually build will be made after we get the budget from FEMA. So this application is to say you're entitled to this. This all meets FEMA. We are intending to defend this to say that you're entitled to this level of improvement in this budget. And once we get a budget from FEMA, they understand and we understand that we're going to come back to you and say, what are your goals? What are those other alternatives? What are the other funding sources now? Now, based on that benefit cost, what do you want to finish the design for? Which is part of the reason why we stopped at 30%. We needed to do enough to have a legitimate and confident cost. It's a substantial cost and it's a complicated one. So we wanted to do that thoroughly and we wanted to be able to defend it. But it is not today. This plan, this set of plans is a credible and defensible application, but it's not necessarily the decision as to what you're actually going to build in the end. The questions you're having, we can have those next April when we hear from FEMA how much money you're going to get. If that makes sense.
Palin.
So please correct me if misunderstood. So even if we mention all these things in the plan, it doesn't bind us, right? After taking the fund from FEMA, we can change them.
That's right.
So why are we putting those things in the plan then?
Because FEMA won't give you a number unless you come forward to them with what is described as the minimum codes and standards plan. So their obligation, they're basically backfilling your insurance company, and the insurance relationship you have with FEMA is they're obligated to give you money to meet the minimum codes and standards. Now, once they determine this is the budget, here's $16 million, as long as you spend that in a way that also meets the codes, you can spend it in different ways. Does that make sense?
So I'm trying to understand, it's just a bureaucratic process. FEMA knows it won't be the final. We know it will not bind us, but they still want to see it, right?
Well, they would also want to see the other plan and make sure that
Okay.
meets the code requirements.
Okay.
So yes, so
That's
this is a plan that it is credible, it's legitimate, it's consistent with all of their standards for a flood-proofed building. But it has a risk profile that, Tim is saying, I don't like that risk profile. I'd like a better one for that much money. And, could we we had an alternative we talked about with a new fire station outside of the district. That has a risk profile of 0 for flood impacts, but it was also twice the number that this one is. So they'd say, sure, you can do that. We're only going to give you what's in this budget for the fire station towards that. Now, if you can find other sources, we're also happy. We'll support you in going to do that. But they needed this package to determine what they're going to give us for that top line number. So that's the purpose of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank
So-
you.
So what you're saying is that what we need to present to FEMA is a plan that will address their regulation, that we have restore the building up to current codes and regulations, and this is a proposal that would satisfy their requirements and provides them a number that in your view, we're entitled to collect from FEMA. If we wanted to, since we're at a number, FEMA would not approve a cost that's higher than this because we've already established that this is all we would need to spend to restore it to current codes.
That's it essentially. This is the ceiling for what they're going to give as part of your insurance settlement.
Thanks.
There may be other grants and things that we can bring to add to it, but we're establishing the ceiling from them in terms of cost with this application.
Okay, thanks. Sal?
Thanks for that explanation. It helped me quite a bit. You talked about like energy codes, for example, which apply to the entire building. Does this design, this 30% design, in fact, take the entire building into account, or just the part of the building that is susceptible to flooding?
The part of the building that's substantially renovated. So the building code has a provision where you're grandfathered in until you do a substantial renovation. There's a definition of that. So we've applied that to the entire basement and everything that's substantially being renovated on the first floor. So it's not the entire building, it's just the areas that are getting major renovations.
Okay, great, thank you.
Adrian?
You mentioned, so this has to be in by January, and then is it April 2025 or April 2026?
Is Kelly still up there?
Yeah, so I'm still up here. I hope it's April 2025
Yeah.
that we know. In the cover that I provided, we did provide a rough sketch of the timeline if everything goes to plan. But I mean, it's FEMA, so who knows, right? So best guesses. I mean, if they did sort of award us with this, we were able to come up with a design that we like and move this forward. We're looking at doing those final designs in calendar 25, and then probably not going out to bid for construction documents until 2026, and probably completing that in 2027 maybe. So just to kind of level set, like what this looks like if FEMA responds with this alternative procedures project, which would give us a lump sum of money. If they say, no, we're not going to do that, it'll just put us back into the public assistance review, and it would be more of a reimbursement basis. This would be better for us because, it kind of gives us that lump sum to kind of look at and then decide how to act accordingly. So we'll see.
And go ahead, Kelly. You have
Follow up on that. So thank you for that background. So as we talked about the second floor, and I asked Bill for some background on the second floor in terms of the history. There's a long history of the second floor being provided to Lost Station Theater at no cost of rent. And so that is the third floor of City Hall. And we know that DPW had to move their offices because there wasn't space in City Hall, and it's obviously flood resistant, which is the second floor of a building, and that is in downtown. I think that if we're talking about April in terms of a next design, we need to simultaneously have conversations about, we said the values of our council and what we want to look at in terms of the second floor of our City Hall. And there is a lease for Lost Station Theater that we should put on the agenda to discuss in January. and have a conversation about the future of our second floor of City Hall and how this integrates into a flood resilient building and an opportunity to have all of our City Hall offices in one location.
Bob, a question about the second floor, the upstairs where the theater is. Is it accurate to think that FEMA would not give us anything for renovation of that level because it wasn't at all damaged by the flood? Or is there a potential that we could get some money for that if what we were doing was moving office space that had been damaged up to that level?
Right. No, so under the scenario that we've been describing, this process of getting to a lump sum number, they'd base their reimbursement based on this design and this cost number, and then we could spend that on moving offices up to that second floor, the theater space or other uses up there. Just like we're spending it on going to the DPW or proposing to spend it on going to the DPW garage. Because of the flood, it's causing the city to make those decisions, and therefore that threat is legitimate. And again, they're only, I'm assuming, we'll be going into negotiations with them and learning more about their requirements. There are other designs that also meet FEMA floodproofing requirements that don't involve reusing the basement. So as long as we meet FEMA codes and the building codes, and you have this amount of money, you will have those choices to decide how best to spend that. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, Lauren.
Thanks. Yeah, this has been really helpful and appreciate the questions and discussion. Definitely, I think I understand the approach that you're taking to go to FEMA and appreciate the flexibility and would very much be wanting to look at other alternatives for the actual design. But it makes sense to me to move forward with what you're proposing. I guess my one kind of minor question is, if we're putting in heat pumps, do we have to keep an oil boiler? Why are we keeping fossil fuels at all?
Yeah, good question. So interestingly enough, the heat pumps are redundant. They'd be put in for cooling, but they'd be a redundant heat system for those offices that now have heat pumps. And they are more energy efficient. But the city hall is part of the district heating system. And so I'm assuming, reading into this, that the economics of running the district system and the investment that's there was the city hall being part of that. And those boilers aren't for the city hall. Those boilers are for the district. So they're not necessarily, they don't come on. You heat the building off the district heat under normal circumstances. And if there's a problem with the district, then those boilers kick on to help the district. They could be located anywhere else on that loop that we can find. They don't need to be in that basement. We just hadn't found another location for them yet. Yeah.
Very interesting. Lauren, do you have another one?
That's
Okay. Why don't we move on to, if we're happy with this, let's move on to the fire department.
Yeah, so the fire department is somewhat similar. Again, it's a dry floodproofing strategy. It has a basement. It's a well-built building. Doesn't have nearly the permeability that the city hall does on the first floor. The fire department uses their basement space for equipment repair and training and those kinds of functions in the basement. And so we have a design that's again covers the dry floodproofing strategy for, in this case, we are structurally reinforcing the basement. There's a lot of water over that. We are adding shields on windows. We are adding flood doors on the entryway doors. If we're going to reuse this building, we don't have any choice but to have dry floodproofing because the apparatus floor is below the design flood elevation. We have very large automatic floodgates that sit in front of the 3 apparatus doors. And then the rear, more modern addition in the back, the perimeter of that is reconstructed to raise windows up, to put water membranes behind the brick, to deal with the ADA access. We have a new elevator going in to meet code into the fire station. So all of those elements are added into the fire station, similarly, as well as the code upgrades, energy codes, ADA codes. We don't have the same level of asbestos in the fire department. That project, again, would have the first level of resistance is really the dry flood proofing. We don't have a second and a third because the essential use is on the ground floor. The apparatuses need to exit the building during a flood and stage somewhere. The flood doors come up. All of that works appropriately, and then when the water drains away, they can drop those gates and open the flood doors and go back into their facility to be able to operate in the day after the flood. So that's what's included in the fire station. One other note: at the moment, some of the utility infrastructure for the fire station is in City Hall. So if the City Hall gets flooded, it would also wipe out the electrical components and the communication for the fire department. So we've split the two buildings and we've run new leads in, so it's all waterproof up to and above the design flood elevation. Fire department has all of its electrical components raised above the design flood elevation. It gets a new communication, new power feed in. It's not going through the City Hall. It has new connection to the generator, standby generator. So again, it can run independently, and if we drop one, we don't drop them both, the way it's currently set up. Yeah, so that's the fire department.
All right. Any questions about the fire department? I'm glad you told us about the floodgates, because I was wondering how are we keeping the flood water off the garage, or whether you're just going to be letting that flood and dry waterproof all the non-garage parts of it. Okay.
Yeah, we circulated a video. It's a great video of these gates rise automatically when the floodwaters come in. Mm-hmm. So it is a product that is manufactured with some history.
Oh, did you send that to us? I don't recall seeing it, but I'd like to.
Shared it to Kelly. I'm not sure where it went.
I'm happy to share it.
Okay, good. It was because the drawings, I know they're from an engineer's perspective, they're exactly what you need. Yeah. From a non-engineer's perspective, it's kind of hard to look at them and figure out what they are.
Yeah, that video is helpful. It's helpful to see.
Any questions or comments from council? Okay. You've got a little bit on the police station. Do you need to talk about that at all?
Very quickly, the police station is above design flood elevation, and it is dry flood proofed. It has a little bit of leakage that comes in during a flood, and we needed to manage it better. That's what happens when you dry flood proof. You get a leak, and you got to pump it out, and we've got a few leaks to plug, and we got to have a better sump pump. So that's why it's so minimal. It worked pretty well. It was just that there were costs to clean up and inventory repairs in the police station. Part of that was because the server and IT equipment was located in the basement. That's already been elevated and out of there. So, and in mind in the future is really the strategy for police. Yeah.
So to be clear on what you're asking for tonight, you're not asking us to approve the design. You're asking us to approve we go to FEMA with a cost estimate based on these designs. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And then we will have opportunities in the future to change the design in a number of ways.
Right. What we would recommend is what we would normally do in a process like this is go back to the city with what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish? What are those alternatives? And and how can we describe the different risk profiles of those different alternatives for you? And try to, we have good costs on this alternative. We've done real work here with a lot of experts and been thoughtful. So we have a level of accuracy on this that we don't have on those other alternatives. But the alternatives we discussed last time are still, many of them still compliant with codes, and we can dust those off and talk about how those compare in terms of risk and cost benefit. And hopefully with that information, you can decide, give us some direction. We never came to you with using the second floor, the theater. That is a third alternative that was not on the table. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because for instance, one thing I remember, there's been some discussion about when we renovate City Hall, could we put public restrooms and showers downstairs in the lower level? And
Yeah.
that's a pretty attractive alternative to some of us. But I didn't hear you say anything that would be inconsistent with that use.
And we actually did put a public bathroom in on the ground floor, elevated it so it's level with the ground, so that that's actually included in this. Yeah, so it might get pulled out in the FEMA funding, not sure, we'll see. But it's in there.
Okay. Tim?
Quick question, Bob, while we got you. So within these proposals, are backflow preventers part of the hardware that are prescribed?
Yeah,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say for all buildings, but is that something we could put in sooner and be reimbursed for?
I don't see why not. You know, the challenge with, so the fire station has backflow preventers on the drainage system. City Hall does not on the sanitary. And the challenge with City Hall is we're not sure we know where all the sanitary is, because historically there were different bathrooms in the basement. And so when they pull the bathrooms up, there's no evidence. You really got to dig the floor out to find them. And then, so the plan is to, we plumb so that there's one location leaving for the sanitary pipe, and that's where we put that backflow preventer on. So you might be, like the finger in the dike thing with multiple holes by doing it now in the City Hall. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, folks, so at this point, we're looking for a motion to approve this. I assume that's where we are. Would somebody make that motion? Yeah, that's fine.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Any comments from the public? All right, seems like we're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thank you
It was
all.
a very useful, detailed presentation. Okay, it's not 8:30 yet, but we started early. Before we start the budget review, we'll take our 10-minute break. It is 8:16. I will call us back to order. And we are up to item number 9 on our budget, or on our agenda, the budget review. And Sarah, welcome.
Jump in before we get too far. I don't know how you guys want to take it. I know Sarah may have some information. I had 3 things I wanted to say, just kind of 3 or 4 things I want to say just at the beginning, kind of kick us off tonight. One is some good news. I think Sarah may be sharing this as well, but we took a look at the budget that the school is presenting tonight, and their preliminary information that was online shows that their tax rate is going to drop 1.62% from last year. That may not be what it ends up with, but that's what that looks like. So that is good news. I just wanted, I know these questions come up and we're going to talk about them, and I know we have tough decisions to make, and that's what we're here for. But I did want to make a couple of comments because, things I've heard. So one of the questions has to do with us being, our budget being just under 7% and understanding the challenge of that. And I've been thinking about that. Our team talked about it. And, I guess I'll just say that I know and we know that if we could come in at a 0 budget that funded all the things, we'd be heroes. And if we could come in lower, that we'd be heroes. We know that. So why would we set ourselves up to deliver something that we know will be criticized for? And it's because we also know what we need to deliver the services that people say they want. And we have been at this. There's never been a year where someone has said, we have more money than we know what to do with, so let's just raise the budget. We're always juggling, always trying to put things together to make it work. So 7% may be too high, maybe we may have to do things, but it's not because we're trying to play games. And no one in this room has said that, but I've heard that, and it's like, no, if we want you to appreciate what we do, and if we could do 0 and do all the things, we certainly would. So this is, this is our best way of telling you that if you want to do what you want to do, this is what it is. The other thing I wanted to talk about quickly, because it's come up a lot, I've read a lot about it in different places, and we heard some comments at the last meeting, was about, directors and management and top heavy and all those kind of things, and consolidations, all those kind of things. So I just wanted to go through, and many of them are in the room and can maybe offer more statement, service about that. But every one of our people, we're a small city with small departments. Every one of our department heads, directors, supervisors, are service providers directly. We don't have anyone who just sits in an office with a computer and a spreadsheet directing the services. Just going down through the police chief and deputy police chief take shifts. When we're low, they're running a shift. They come out at midnight. Both of them were in a scuffle yesterday trying to break up fights on the street during the day. They're not doing policy direction. Our fire chief is also the deputy health officer, answers calls. Our deputy fire chief runs all the payroll, runs all the things, and is one of our counters on both ambulance and fire calls. So they are going on the back of those trucks, coming out the middle of the night for all of these calls. Our public works director and his deputy public works director are both engineers. They're designing projects. They're out supervising projects. They are out checking on things. They're drafting all these bids. All this work that you see is coming from people. They're doing this work. It's not like they've got their multitudes of staff that's doing this work. So even in our smaller departments, our recreation director, people have seen Arnie out there like fixing the pool, mowing the lawn, doing manual labor, getting in climbing up whatever it takes to do, and it's going to be worse this year because we have less people. Our senior director is out doing direct services with elder people. Our parks director, Alec, is out there with the crew. They do trees. They do the maintenance. They're not sitting there directing. They're actually doing physical work. They're counters. The assistant city manager is doing all of our homelessness work. He's overseeing this, reconstruction project. Is dealing with all of, backing up the office, doing the community surveys, all those kind of things, and dealing with stuff. I do labor negotiations. I do legislative work. I back up in the office. If I'm the only one there, I'm helping people get Lister cards. I'm helping people book rooms. We're all pitching in and doing things. Our Justice Center director, not funded by us, but they're teaching classes. They are, dealing directly with clients. Finance director, sorry, didn't mean to miss you. Managing all this FEMA money that you just heard about is also our backup for payroll and for AP and for, reviewing warrants. And so, again, we have our finance director who could actually be running our payroll sometimes and does on occasion, pays bills, goes over and reviews bill payments. Our facilities and sustainability coordinator, in addition to doing all the, net zero work and facilities management work, cleans up trash, again, puts in air conditioners, does whatever needs to be done. Was up there hauling out stuff at the Country Club Road after the flood. Our communications coordinator does all of that. We'll be taking over the MSAC communications work as well as city manager office work. Our executive assistant in the city manager's office work is now being combined with the assessing assistant, so we'll be doing two people's jobs, hence the reason for Evelyn to help her out. We've already consolidated one admin position for Parks, Rec, and Seniors. They used to all have one. Now there's only one for all of them. Police and Fire have a combined rec and a combined admin, and a lot of that is ambulance billing, which is, a huge sum of revenue for us in our budget. And when I talk about admin for Parks and Rec and Seniors, we are actually reducing one of those positions, but the other people left, that's our project, that's our registrations for programs, taking in our class revenues, class payments, all the things that help fund what we do. We have now consolidated a lot of our maintenance with Parks and Rec. They're both, you heard Chris Hancock earlier say they've cut one, staff position, won't be able to have someone up there if we had a rec center. Well, now we're cutting two staff positions, and the second one's gone this year. So I appreciate that we have difficult decisions to make, but I want to push back for the community about this notion that we have sort of all these people in their ivory tower with their computers doing nothing. Every one of them is a counter. Every one of them is delivering services to our public. And if you were to change their titles, the work they're doing still needs to be, I left out planning. The planning director is working on our master plan, which we need to do, is working on the housing project, and did all the flood stuff. One of the reasons we're only paying $438,000 out of a $22 million cost is because we got our flood risks low in advance, the work of the planning department. They saved the city over $1.1 million in this alone through their prevention efforts. And that's what they're doing all the time. So I get that we have to make things. Our HR director is dealing with health insurance, trying to find out alternatives for us, because we all know that's a big issue. Deals with our employee wellness and mental health, and given everything that we're doing is dealing with mental health. Is our person, we, all of us, are an employer. It's not us against the employees, right? You, as the city government, are the employer of these people. And when they, they get the support they need when they're having stress, when they've got a big medical issue in themselves or their family, our HR director is walking them through every step of the way to make sure that their coverages are there, that they're getting what they need so that they can come back to work and do what they do. So sorry for the rant, but I really feel like, if we're going to make decisions, we need to make informed decisions. And if we combine directors because we think it's a good idea, we're still going to need the same number of people to do the work. So if we reduce people, we've got to decide what work we're not going to do. And a good example of that, someone was mentioning to me, the fire department. They said, well, they've got a chief and a deputy and a lot of lieutenants. And that's true. They all count. They're all going on calls, and they're all part of the shift. And the difference in pay between a firefighter and a lieutenant is not what's the stress in this budget. It's full-time positions with all their, their pay, their overtime, and their benefits and everything. You heard us talk about on the budget video that there were 338 calls where we had a second simultaneous call with our ambulances this past year. So 338 times, there was one ambulance out, a second one made during the same time, so our station was empty, our ambulance was fully deployed. If we're really going to save money, we're going to cut a bunch of positions in that department, and we're not going to make that second call, which means almost once a day, someone in the city is not going to get the response that they get today. They'll have to wait for Barry City or Barry Town or East Montpelier if they are, if they are available. And I'm not advocating for that, but I'm saying those are the kinds of service reductions that are really going to save big money. We can stack, what time they show up. We can try to tweak around with the overtime. And we always are working on that. But if we want to have that level of safety service, if we want to have that level of DPW response, if we want to have that level of things, the same number of people need to mow lawns. The same number of people need to dig and do all the various stuff that we do. The same number of people need to do all the things you ask and that we bring for you. So with that, I will shut up, but I just wanted, it really bothers me when I hear our people being sort of diminished as some kind of, well, they've just got too many directors, they don't supervise anything, they don't do anything. And none of our employees do. They're all providing functional work. I'd say one last thing too about admin cuts. And this one's painful to bring up, honestly, but several years ago, we were asked to cut, too many people in City Hall, cut your admin budget. So we got down, we had a part-time finance director and a part-time chief accountant, and we had cut back in the finance director. And we gave away $400,000 to a contractor by mistake. And it was awful. And we all went through hell, and we got most of it back after a couple of years, and we beefed up the finance department. And the city council said, never again. Let's make sure that you adequately staff and that you have the right people to make sure we're accounting for all the money. And we haven't done it since, and we track everything much more carefully. And but That's why we have the number of finance people that we have, because there's accounts payable, there's accounts receivable, there's grants management, there's FEMA, there's all the different funds, there's payroll, there's all the things. And, you know, it's our accounting statements. So you see people in City Hall, at least 6 or 7 of them are in the finance department. They might be stationed in the clerk's office, they might be somewhere else, but they are doing that work. They're not admin people just doing nothing. So I know we have to make hard decisions. I'm prepared to work with you on it, but I also am not going to let our folks get the raw deal on this. So I'm done.
Thanks, Bill. Hi, Sarah. You are up.
You would like from me? Do you want me to demo the worksheet and then we can go through budget conversation questions I can do my best to answer?
Well, what I'm thinking is, you know, looking at the names on the screen, I think there are probably some people who weren't here before, and there may be people in the room who weren't here before. So it might be worth giving like a high-level overview of the changes we're proposing to the budget. And is that something that you're prepared to do, or?
I mean, I hadn't prepared to, but I can give it a shot.
Okay.
Originally, I presented you all with memos about an unfortunate budget situation that had us looking at a 24% tax rate increase. Obviously, we knew that that was not going to be palatable to anybody, and so we have done our best and trimmed about $2 million off of that original budget proposal, and have pitched what is a 6.94% overall tax increase. That also includes the library's increase and the ballot items, moving the community fund to the ballot and CVHHH. I think the tax rate that is city-specific is about 5.78% increase. Of that, about 2.2 is related to capital. That's $260,000. We equated that to about 2 cents, which was a previous tried and true method for getting capital funding up to a prior goal of what we thought would be steady state, even with some hiccups. So we just want to continue that and invest in infrastructure. And then the operational increase, everything else was about 3.5%, which is in line with CPI, 3.6, I think. And so that's kind of the general overview of the budget, where it sits today. I sent council, and I have posted on our website a worksheet so that you can enter items and see how that impacts the tax rate itself and how it increases or decreases that percentage. In that spreadsheet, and I'll share it in a minute, all the cells are locked except for the few that you can edit in to make sure there are no errors. You can change the home value and the like. It also includes the education rate in there that Bill mentioned. I went to their website today and I pulled their presentation that presented a 1.62% decrease in their tax rate before any changes to the education funding formula. I do have some experience with that, and it is messy, and I don't intend to speak to that here, but I just expect we will hear more about that as they get more information in January, as that is how it at least worked at my previous job in the school. So I will share that spreadsheet so I can give a quick run through about how it works. It's pretty simple, and it is a good tool to see exactly what you need to plug in to reach a desired tax rate increase. And I also wanted to mention that based on the grand list we're using at this time, it was about $131,000 is 1 penny on the tax rate. Okay, so this is the budget summary worksheet.
Folks in the back, do you need the lights off to see this? Go ahead.
So this is the FY26 budget summary worksheet. It shows with a comparison to 25, and so basically it takes you through the total budgeted revenue. It backs out the non-tax revenue and the DID tax revenue to come up with what we need to raise in property taxes. It then shows you what that generates as a tax rate, exclusive of the ballot items. Then you'll see in here, I've got the ballot items listed for the Kellogg Hubbard Library, the Montpelier Community Fund, and CVHHH. And so you can see here that makes up of the tax rate before you get to the property tax rate with ballot items included. And as I noted, you can see here the 5.78% for municipal, and then it gets down to the 6.94 with all the ballot items in. As you go down further, in the past we've summarized what of that budget funding is related to outside entities, to community enhancements. As we'd mentioned previously, you'll see there's about 39.1 in Montpelier Live funding that is no longer in this section because it would be included in that DID tax section. And then the policies and relationships, I have in this hidden several rows now because we have not funded some things back-to-back years, like the housing trust and those types of items, so you can see the comparison. And it also shows you the capital and equipment plan for debt and infrastructure from the prior fiscal year and this year. So 2.4 million from the prior year and 2.66 this year. And then you get to the important part of this spreadsheet and the unlocked cells that people can work in. So, there's room here for you to make notes, for you to write a description of what you would like to add or what you would like to cut. And then if I put 131,000 in here, you can see, please bear with me, negative 100. If you wanted to see what that impact was, you can see down here it totals it. It shows you that's 1 penny on the tax rate. It takes our base increase from the 645 down to 554, and it shows you over here on the side, we started at 6.94. With these options, it is 5.88% tax rate increase. And then as you go to the bottom here, let me just back this out. You'll see there is an area for you to be able to adjust the average residential property. That's about 370,000 right now, but you could stick any amount in here to see how that impacts your taxes if you're a member of the public or council. And you can see in FY25 what that equated to, and then the current budget as proposed. Municipal only, excluding ballot items, equates to about $196 increase. With ballot items, it's $241 over the prior year. Right now, with the education rate as it stands and is available on their website, it is a reduction of about $78. So right now, the current budget that's presented, including the education, would impact the average residential home value of $370 with a $163 tax rate increase annually. And so this worksheet gives you the ability to plug and play with the items you do or don't want to see in and see how that impacts. And so I think this is a really useful tool. I built this last year and I think it helped a lot, and I hope that it will help with deliberations this year as well. And I will keep a running copy as we make updates or get more information on the ed rate, or if anything with the grand list knowingly changed, and I would provide you all with a new copy. But that's I wasn't
Thanks,
really
Sarah.
prepared for a spiel, but that's it.
Oh, yeah. No, that's very good. And this is on the city's webpage, so anyone who lives in the city could do this same thing.
That's correct. It's on the finance page. So if you go to the finance department, you'll see a section on the budget, and this spreadsheet is linked right there. And I'm sure Evelyn can make it a news flash on the front of the city page if people were interested in that.
Great. Thank you. So here we are. We're picking up on where we were last week, and I know that people had comments and questions last week, and people have submitted questions to the city manager and the finance director since our last meeting. But I'll start by asking if there are any other questions that members of the council have now, or any thoughts that they'd like to to discuss right up front. And they can be as broad as, what would such and such a change be to, overall, I think we're spending too much, or I think we're not spending enough, and here's why. I'd just like to get a sense of where people are on, in the overall conversation. Tim, are you?
So I asked to see if we could see a CPI increase budget, and Bill was able to get it down to basically just under 7%. So I'd still like to see the differential to know where we're at, and because you said you put it out there and it's up to us, we're going to have to work on that. A few of the areas I'd ask questions about to start would be, I think our technology contract is coming up, and I think that's one that a number of folks have reacted to the number, and it's also a pretty big increase this year. So kind of to look at that one, see what we can do with it. And the other concept piece that's come up that I'd like to investigate is the concept of maybe the senior center having a different status, like a 501c3 concept. We could work out a favorable arrangement on the facility if they want, but it would get them out from under the city's umbrella and so we've been told, might free them up for some possible grant money they're not eligible for right now. So that's two areas I'd like to throw out.
I think, just factually, I think, about 400,000 would be to go from where we are to 3.5%, roughly, depending what you want to use as CPI. It's in that ballpark. I think we give you 460 to go to 3%.
Yes, 460 something.
Yeah, it's in that range.
Could you provide some detail about what our technology contract is paying for now, and how we're managing that?
Yep, so I'm managing that.
Excellent.
So right now, our technology contract, at one point, the city did have in-house tech staff, and it became too much for in-house. We needed outside expertise. We have a lot of different systems, and this contract is up. I built the budget up $25,000 over the prior year for the technology contract. Right now, they've still, knock on wood, kept us locked in at the $25,000 per month. They are writing off about $6,000 on us for this, and so. They also are virtual. We have a virtual server. They back up all of our systems. They back up specialized systems. And it isn't just service we're paying for. It's also tech equipment is included in that. And so part of that $25,000 increase that I put in the budget was because we are going to have to go out with an RFP. My hope is to get that out by the end of January, once I get a little breathing room from this, so that we can get results back by March. Because if we do need to make a change, it's going to be a huge lift to make that change. We have a significant number of pieces of computer equipment that are not city-owned. And so the RFP that went out initially 5 years ago when we got into this was missing a lot of critical information about our systems and their age and some of that. So we've come across a lot of things with VC3 that we've been noting to include in the RFP, which would most definitely drive an RFP response higher likely than what we are currently paying. We do need all of these services. We have highly sophisticated tech and programs we run. And so I don't know that we could do that in-house successfully. And if we did bring an in-house person on to manage that, we would still need outside services and we would still need the equipment. Our servers are beyond end of life. One of the things that keeps me up at night is when we're going to have to replace one or fully migrate into the cloud, and when we don't have the funds available to do so. And so, we are working towards being fully secure and fully virtual. We just aren't there yet due to financial constraints. And so I do expect we could get much higher bids than we expect when we go out to bid for this. And when we do so, if we switch from VC3 to a different bidder, all of that equipment that is VC3 owned, we will have to purchase out of. And so there is going to be a cost to shift in equipment as well. So I was trying to make sure we were covered. And to be honest, I'm not sure that this budget covers us, but it was my best guess to get us there.
Just want to add on to that, Sarah mentioned that we had sophisticated equipment. I think a lot of people look at our costs and they picture their office with laptops and things like we have. And we have extremely sophisticated SCADA systems at our water plant, our wastewater plant, all of our fire systems, police systems, dispatch CAD, their criminal record systems, all these things are, way more than the average office. They're very specialized, very highly. And they are really our, key public health things are based on them. So we can't mess around with them if they go down or if there's a problem. It's not. So I just, sometimes people see that number and they're like, well, we pay a lot less. And it's like, yeah, you probably do because you don't have the same level of tech.
And this also includes all of our Adobe licenses and Microsoft Office platforms and applications, and this is the all-in for tech.
Do you want to follow up, Tim?
But it just seems like, almost like these guys own us now. If they've got all this hardware and we've gotten into this arrangement, which doesn't feel healthy either. Maybe a little different approach. Is there a way to look at it, or any of the other issues we're going to talk about, and say, okay, not all the reasons why you can't make a change, but hey, maybe if we did something different, is there a way we could do an assessment of this and look at this differently? And is everything we're buying something we need now, or is it something we needed 5 years ago and maybe now we don't need it?
I am really open to seeing what comes in from the bid. Change is good. I'm not advocating that we would or wouldn't. It would depend what things came in looking like. But I don't have any spare computers right now for people. So when somebody goes down, we're all that we had, I distributed in the flood, and based on what was lost. And I haven't purchased more because funds are tight. And so we are limping by right now, and the technology replacement costs won't go away, even if that's not part of a contract moving forward, which I could see going either way, but we would still have them, and that would still have to be budgeted for someplace.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment, Tim. I don't want to. We're offering information. It's not, we're not saying we can't do it. We're just trying to make sure people understand what we're up against when we do it. Like this challenge that's there. I completely agree. If we can look at things and if we can look at how we run our operations and figure out ways to do them smarter, we ought to be doing that all the time. It's just want to make sure people understand kind of how we got here, what the challenge is. So, not saying we got to do something.
I will save you money anywhere I can. You can ask anybody behind me. My go-to answer is no.
Seeing some people nodding behind you. Adrian, yeah.
So I sent in questions very late today, and so I'll just kind of go through some of my thoughts in terms of, I come at this from an organizational perspective and looking at it from a very high level and how we operate as an organization. And so when I look at this organization, I don't know all the ins and outs of, what you all do every single day. I don't sit in your office and watch you do your work. So I have done that as a consultant, but I haven't done it for the city of Montpelier. So these are, some of the questions I had. We're just trying to get some kind of baseline data so that we can make some, informed decisions. And, when I look at, an organization that is struggling in terms of budget, so we know that we don't have enough money coming in to support, everything that we want to do, or that maybe that's a choice that we decide we want to do in terms of lowering our taxes and our budget. But efficiency, I think, is really important. And that report from 2010, that was 14 years old. That was the last time an efficiency report was done on the city government. And 14 years in technology and operations is I don't even know what was happening 14 years ago. Maybe there was like an access database or something. Very archaic. And so I think that is should be put to the side because we are in 2024 and we have, you said we pay for a Microsoft bundle. The technology in Microsoft is astronomical to automate our processes. And I counted, I mean, I don't have much extra time in my day either. So I just went through very quickly and I counted 40 paper forms that we have that we, you know, if I want a pool pass or if I want a permit or if I want to do something with the city, may not be 100% accurate, but there was 40 forms. And so if I have to do business with the city of Montpelier, I need to go to my computer. Some of them are PDF fillable, some of them I need to print off, but I have to fill it out, either mail it, I don't know, maybe mail it or bring, like physically walk it to the city. I'm not really sure what that process is, but it's time, it's effort, it's money. Then someone on your staff needs to take that paper form, and I don't know what you do with it. Do you like type it into like a spreadsheet or a database? Do you take the paper check? Like, I don't even know the last time I wrote a check and like go to the bank. So these are all like steps in a process that cost money and it's waste in the system. And so I strongly encourage our city to look at ways to improve these opportunities and these efficiencies because we have experts in our community that are dying to help make our government more efficient. And, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to use some of these expertise to have a very short-term modernization, you know, committee. I don't want to add another committee 'cause our whole list is ridiculous, but maybe a very short sprint to look at, because we can't afford a consultant. We don't want to do a whole nother study, but let's utilize our experts in our community to help us make recommendations so that our staff, they don't have time to do that either, but maybe an outside person to look at our processes and help guide, advise. You know, even with the Microsoft tools bookings, we should not be using, I mean, bookings, for example, you can book all your conference rooms in like 2 seconds. There should be no person involved in booking a conference room ever. And so these are just some very examples of, you know, automating our processes, freeing up staff time to do other things that may be more important than processing paper, you know, processing checks, following up with people. That should all be automated. And the people can provide customer service where it is most needed, but not at that administrative operational level. So that is where my lens is coming from. And those were some of the recommendations that I was asking and even thinking of, like, I'm looking at my notes, like a paper reduction act. Like if someone asked me if I wanted that budget book, I would have said no, because it's all online, and to take time to print, double-sided, 3-hole punch, put in a binder, I know that takes effort because I've done that many, many times in my life, and it takes time for staff to do that for all of us. And I would have just opted not to have one to save time and resources and money for all that paper that was printed that I just look online. That's what I do. And that's, I think, what we should all strive for is less paper, less process, automate, and then use your staff to focus on what matters most, because that can absolutely be done. And I strongly encourage our city to move in that direction.
Yeah, I appreciated that question and that comment, and we're taking a look at that. We'll get back to you, but the number of things we have done, you know, all of our assessing records are online now. Used to be you had to come into City Hall to get them, and many other things. We also find ourselves, we're in a weird place. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's a bit of a generational divide about how people want information. And so when we've had a few things where we've talked, you know, we've tried to make things all online, and we end up having to spend staff time to sort of walk people through that, you know, they don't know how to do it at all. So then they come in and we have to print the paper for them and work it out to them. So we're, you know, probably 20 years from now, it won't be an issue. And 20 years ago, it also wasn't an issue the other way. But I think we're trying to do both things. You know, we went away from printing the annual report. I mean, we still print them, but we used to mail them to every single home. And now we print a couple hundred to have, and everything's digital. So we're certainly aware of that and try to reduce those costs. But and I know in COVID, but that was a good question. We're going through all of that, and when we have more info about what we have and haven't done, we'll be happy to get back to that. So it's a good point.
Sorry, I had another follow-up question, if that's okay. And I put this in my notes, and I'll just ask it. and I'm not going to go through all these bullets. It was from a constituent that was asking about the parking revenue. And so one of the things that we talked about was the loss of parking revenue. So I guess the question was, he has it's all in this whole email about what the questions were. I'm not going to go through it, but for the parking, is it because, what is the reason why we have such a reduction in our parking? Do we know like the root cause of why that happened? That's the question I'll ask.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a walk through the downtown during the day, the parking spaces are empty. And we were doing well before COVID, and then the pandemic hit, and we didn't have people in the downtown. And then it started to pick back up, and then the flood hit, and we didn't have people in the downtown. And then we didn't charge for parking. And we've just not seen people return the way they had before. And so that is where the parking shortfall is coming from. It's not that people aren't paying the meters. It's not that we're not ticketing people for not paying the meters. It's that there aren't people there to pay the meters.
And we are back to, I think, just to clarify, we didn't charge people at the meters after the flood for a period of time to try to give people flood relief and to give the businesses some relief. We are back to charging. But yeah, it's really just supply and demand.
We had built the 25 budget assuming it would return, and it has become very clear that it didn't, and that we can't anticipate that it will for 26.
Yeah, Palin.
So I know that we may or may not put this on a ballot because we talk about maybe public should understand when they say yes to library, yes to community fund, it will affect their tax rate. Is there any way we can see here in this active thing? So I don't know if we take that items and just check the tax increase. I don't know how to do it, but, or maybe if they say yes, right?
Yeah, I can provide
But if they say no, then there will be some
the
difference.
difference between the ballot items and the general fund budget itself is 6.94 all in, 5.88 before. So
Okay.
that's the percentage difference, and you'd have to math into it on this spreadsheet, but you'll be able to see it there.
Okay, thank you. So 1 point, what's the difference? 1 point? The difference.
I'm not going to math in my head, I'm sorry.
Yeah, me neither. Although I'm having my MBA and I took finance, I said, oh my God.
1.06%.
Thank you.
Just on parking, I'll just point out on Facebook today, there's a discussion in a group called Montpelier Area Friends that has, about parking, that has 83 comments. People complaining about what they pay to park in downtown Montpelier, and I don't, it's true, a lot of the time, we are expecting people to park in Montpelier, and the basic reason for having parking meters and enforcing it with tickets is so that people don't camp out all day in parking spaces, and the parking spaces are available for people who come to do business downtown.
Yeah, that's a really important point, just for the council's benefit, the public's benefit. The city didn't get into and isn't in the business of parking management really as a revenue raiser. Obviously, it does bring in money, and we have costs and we have work, but it really is meant to manage parking, to have turnover, to have a vibrant downtown, so that people aren't just parked all day long and someone who wants to go to a store. And I think we might need to revisit, at least have some discussion about what we want to do with our parking supply, whether we shrink the area that we manage and absorb less costs, or whether we, and we should certainly involve Montpelier Live and the business community in this. I don't think we should do this alone, and it's going to be, nobody likes to pay parking meters and nobody likes to get a ticket, but then people don't like it when they can't find a parking spot and they're riding around because someone could park there all day on street. So it's a challenge, and it's one we need to really look at hard because we're not covering our costs anymore.
Carrie?
Yeah, not to harp too much on parking, but I'm thinking that if we got rid of parking meters, if we got rid of charging for parking, we would still have to pay for enforcement, and that's probably the bulk of our expense, right? So eliminating fee parking would be great in many ways for the community, but we still have to manage the 2-hour limit. Unless we didn't have that, but then we don't accomplish the goal of keeping turnover happening. And I just want to, I think it's important to remember that just a few years ago, Montpelier, everybody knew you could not find parking in Montpelier, right? It was like our biggest problem. And so, maybe that'll come around again, or maybe not. But if we're operating at anything that's operating at a deficit, that consistently for years on end makes us, we have to ask, do we need to keep doing this? Is it worth spending a lot of money to keep the turnover in the parking lot, in the parking spaces?
Yeah, for the 26 budget, we cut about $200,000 from it, and that should get us, to break even with proper management and reassessment. But that would be break even.
Just a process question. So this is my first budget season here in Montpelier. So, what do we do from here? So I need to know what we're working towards. So we asked for, 3.5 around there tax, and then you say this is what we have, and then we don't want to reduce staff because everyone has a job. I don't know where we go. What do we do? What is it the city's council's responsibility to say? Someone explain this to me, that'd be helpful.
I have my own response to that. I think other people may have a response to that too. It is the city council's, the city manager is required by the charter to present us with a proposed budget, and he has done that. As of now, it's our budget, and it's our job to work through all the questions involving the budget and make whatever increases or decreases we think we need to do in order to come to a bottom line that we think meets the city's needs and poses a reasonable burden on the taxpayers. And what I think is very good about the interactive spreadsheet that Sarah has given us, and we can all go home and play around with it, is that you can make your own adjustments and see what effect it does. So if you want to have a 4% or a 5% or a 3% budget increase, whatever it is, you can start plugging in cuts. Obviously one of the big places there is money is the Department of Public Works, and we can decide, well, okay, one way to find the money is we're going to cut the increase in the paving budget. And that'll give us a figure of how much the tax rate goes down. And then we decide, well, do we want to deal with the constant emails we get from people saying, you're not taking care of the pavement and you need to spend more money on paving. And there's the same thing as with a lot of those things. So, but that's what we're working towards by January 23rd. We have to finalize the ballot, and that includes, and that's why we have the meetings in January, with the last meeting right now scheduled for January 22nd. And typically we actually do finish it on January 22nd, although there have been years where the council met on that Thursday night to finalize the budget. So that's my view of what we're doing. And Carrie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, my answer is pretty similar, in that we have to, if we want to reduce it, if any individual council member wants to see a lower tax rate increase, then it's probably most effective to use the spreadsheet and figure out what would need to be cut. We know we would need to cut $460,000 to get us down to CPI. And so it's really a matter of thinking about, well, what suggestions, and then people can make a motion to include that. I will say that it's a little tricky in that we don't have like individual people's salaries. We have a whole department salary. And so if we're thinking, well, what if we, cut this person or that person? So, that's the kind of detail that I think we could ask for, or one could ask for, right? Okay.
Sal.
I guess I disagree with that, basically. I mean, the city brought us essentially a budget, initially a budget that a 24% increase budget was, we funded everything that we want to fund. We made a motion, Tim made a motion for a budget of 3.5% increase, and we don't have that.
I don't think there was a motion. If there'd been a motion made and passed, that's what you'd have got.
Well, I think that was the motion. It's the motion I heard.
I don't recall that.
We'd have to look.
Well, really? I'm the
I
only
think
one
people,
who,
I think, so.
I'm the only one who remembers that.
I mean, we're happy to go check the record. I think our recollection is everybody went around and said where they thought they wanted to be.
And I'm not being accusatory here. What I'm saying is, I find it very difficult. The only cuts that I can make are these broad brush strokes.
Yep.
Because I don't know what the police chief needs day to day. I mean, I'm not going to talk about all the stuff that he's stuck in his vest there. I have no idea what that stuff is. But he does. And everybody in their department knows that. And you've been through it in one cycle. And we didn't get there. And so I would prefer, rather than, because, when I do it, I end up bugging Sarah with questions like, I'll offer a change, say, well, we can't really do that, that's CIP, or, a lot of stuff I did last year, my first year, it was just wasted time for everybody. I would prefer to see your team take another run at it to get it to where we want, and then we can say, this is too much, we're going to put this back, we're going to put that back, so long as we know in some detail, what the consequences are, which is the other thing that we don't know.
Right.
We don't know when we eliminate something what the consequences are in any detail.
So
we know there's a reduction in service. That's about it.
So that's what you just described. It's perfect, actually. It's the perfect tension between the elected policy makers trying to set priorities and us trying to give you the information you need to make those decisions, but also run the operation. So where we got to, and I tried to articulate this in the presentation, and I realized it was a lot of information, so I'll try to say it again, is so we'll check. None of us remember a motion being made, because if we'd had a hard line, we would have met it. But where we got to was the clear direction we did take away was don't cut police, fire, and public works. In fact, we want to make sure they're robustly funded. We want to increase the capital plan, and we want to deliver our other services as best we can and have the tax rate be as low as possible. So we got to where we were doing that. And now anything beyond this is going to require a trade-off of one area versus another. So it's going to it's not, and we're happy to help you talk through all that. We can provide you all the numbers that you need, but I felt, but the team felt, but I'll take it on me, that some of everything that's in here has been a priority in the past. So I'm not trying to target anyone's position, but we had a position to deal with net zero and sustainability. That was actually put in by the council, and it's been a high priority. So you take that position away. Are we the ones that says that's no longer a council priority? Or do we just say we took that one because, right? So it's kind of like, okay, here we are. What areas would you like to see us look at? And then we can come back and say, here's how you would get at that. You know, okay, maybe we do need to look at public safety, or maybe, or, you know, and I, you know, my personal opinion really doesn't matter here, but I think, right, public safety is core to what we do. The public works is core to what we do. I get that. It makes sense, and we held that harmless. So, you know, so the vast proportion of the cuts came from Parks, Rec, seniors, and admin. That's because that's what was left. We don't have a lot else left. So what we need is your guidance on where to find the what's left. And it doesn't mean individually necessarily. It doesn't mean, it just says, if you have to choose between this and between this, because now we're talking about either, you know, a specific priority that we have, or we're talking about a specific goal that we've set, or we're talking about a level of service that we can't deliver, or operational shortfalls. So it's sort of kind of which one of those bad choices? These are all bad choices. None of us want to make them. You don't want to make them. I don't, you know. But we also don't want to have a 7% budget. I get that. So how do we make those choices? And we need you to give us some guidance as to where, if you want to get to 3.5, then where generally would you look for those? And then we can come back and say, all right, well, generally, here's what we would do to get there. So I hope that's helpful. I realize you can't go, going through and saying taking $2 out of fuel and $3 out of this is tough. And frankly, we've scraped all of that and have for years. Anything that was in there, I mean, we had, some huge number of operational dollars we took out from the beginning just to try to get it down so that we could at least deliver the services. So that's.
Palin.
So we had an executive session before the budget proposal, and I know I cannot go to details, but we talk about specific things. Is this proposal reflecting that? Because as a city council, we shared our ideas. They were like tiers. But when I look at this budget proposal, maybe it's me, I don't see that, let me say, recommendation is given by the city council for the budget proposal. So
some were, some weren't. Some of those ideas were put in, some weren't. We retooled some things. Some of the ideas that we did weren't on that particular preliminary list. I think, basically what I was looking for was, if we're going to have to cut and lay people off, are you okay with that? And we had that conversation, and I understood that you were. And I think one of the realities that in that conversation, some of you made comments about this is a high priority thing. This is not, if I don't know that I would want to go here. The idea of doing it was there, but we got some feedback about priorities. So it really came down to what are the priorities? And I've said this to councils for years. If you want to give me a number, you'll get my priorities. And I don't mean to sound so arrogant when I say that. I mean, based on what I know yours to be. But you'll still get my judgment as to what's more important than something else, and that may not reflect yours. And so we're trying to get a sense of what's more important to you so we can help you get there.
Adrian, I should say something else as part of the answer to you. And I see you still don't have perfect clarity just by looking at your face. But so to talk about how we work out to the end of the process. First off, I think that you don't really. I don't think that anyone is putting things in the budget saying we need to keep this job or that job because it's really important to us to preserve the job for this person whom we like, or this number of people whom we like. The jobs are being kept or cut because of in my view, it's because of a judgment that they provide needed services to the city. But ultimately, and you see that there are several personnel cuts in the proposed budget. But ultimately, we get down to that last night, and we have to come up with a number. And it often does come down to saying, so-and-so says, I move that we cut this position because it will save us this much on the ballot. And someone seconds it, and there's a vote on that, and that changes the bottom line, depending on who it is. And ultimately, we keep doing that until nobody has any changes to make, and we have a budget that people are willing to say, I'm voting for this budget to put out to the voters. And so, and sometimes it's hard to get to that point. Sometimes it's not as hard to get to that point. But so that's what we're working towards, something where we have a project and product, and we get to that product by not just saying, well, $16 million is too high, it needs to be $13 million. We get to that product by saying, here are all the components of that budget that we're putting into it, because that's what we're voting on. That's what we're telling the voters we want to do, and we're responsible for that. If we go to the voters and say we're going to cut 3 positions in the police department, or cut a position in police, fire, and public works, we know that that's going to have an effect on the service that people get. And people might say, well, I don't like that decision you made. So I hope that's helpful.
No, thank you. That is very helpful. I'd like to work backwards of where we're going towards, and where we are now, where we're going, and how we're going to get there is very important to understand. I think this is close to an impossible situation, because I don't, what Bill says, obviously he knows his staff, he knows what they do every day, but it is not a neutral description of, it's very biased. And so, which is totally appropriate, because this is your staff. And so how do we make an informed decision? I don't know how we would ever make an informed decision based on that information, because everyone in your department is valuable. Everyone provides a high level of service. And so how do we bring ourselves up to that 30,000 foot level and take the people out of the process and say we reduced, an administrative assistant? I truly believe that if we thought about it in a different way, our level of service would not be reduced, because that work would go on to someone else. I think it could be absorbed in a more efficient way. It's just, I think it takes thought, it takes kind of like that leadership to guide the staff, because inevitably it sounds like we do want to cut positions, but how do we know what that impact is truly without a biased opinion? And that's why those consultants, those third people, that's why people hire them to come in, because they don't have that personal connection, and they can look at it in a very neutral way and make recommendations. But we're not going to have that between now and January 22nd. So what is the best way to move forward in making an informed decision that doesn't have a dire impact to our city, but we can still move forward in a productive way?
So I can answer that. And first of all, I appreciate your comments. My comments at the beginning of the meeting were in response to characterizations of our staff. It wasn't that that we can't make reductions. You know, as we go, we've already reduced some positions. And it's our job to give you the best advice and professional information, including what our assessment of the impact is. You know, we don't always get it perfectly, but that's our job. But we're your hired staff. You know, I work for you to give you the information you need. It's not me trying to protect them against you. I'm your employee to implement your will. You know, in my budget presentation, on my last page, I said, you know, what can we do to reduce the tax rate further? And I just wrote, you know, will require policy and priority direction. And I mentioned consider local option sales tax. Very clear, I'm not proposing it, but that's one thing. Reduce capital plan, reduce operating effectiveness. So change strategic priorities such as environmental stewardship or housing, reduce public safety or public works services, severely diminish or eliminate parks, recreation, senior services. Any of those are going to require, except maybe the capital plan, would require additional layoffs. We are in an impossible situation. I don't think we can reduce the tax rate significantly without affecting something we do. And that's not a threat, that's just a fact. And so the question is which area do you want to choose? And, you know, if we're going to cut $400,000, we're going to cut, you know, 2 to 5 people, depending who they are. That's going to make a difference, because we've already been doing these cutting for a long time and consolidating positions. So, and we're here to help you do it. We just want people to be clear. So you, like I said, is it more important to keep this area of position or this area of position? And if you can't give us that direction, and you just give us a number, we'll come back with our best recommendation. And then it's going to be, well, we didn't, that's not, then we'll be in a situation where it might be that's not what we meant. So it's, whichever way we choose to do it is how it goes.
Lauren.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, like everyone, I am struggling mightily with this budget. I mean, it almost feels like, and I say this fully hearing community members who are struggling to pay property taxes right now. But there's a real chance we could be penny wise, pound foolish, make cuts that we don't actually have a plan just for the sake of hitting a specific number that then end up diminishing services when it seems like we need to be looking at, I like the idea of spending a little bit of money to bring someone in and be like, okay, it's 2025 now. There's new technology, there's approaches, like let's assess how our systems work and our staffing structure, and does it still make sense? And are there like ways that would make more sense for this era? Because I do think a 14-year-old study of that, like the world has changed a lot in terms of what technology and stuff can do. So the positions could maybe get refocused on different work that could lead to better service for to meet our community needs. So that kind of investment, I think, like just knowing that we're in a position where we're not anticipating that this is a one-off bad year, but that there's structural issues we need to get at, I think trying to just keep piecemealing at little cuts is just going to diminish services that people need and rely on without solving that underlying problem. So, part of it too is like, do we have the staffing that can be looking at growing the housing that's going to actually grow the ground list that can help bring property taxes down, that's working with the state to look at what's happening with all the empty office buildings. If we're putting all of our staff down to the bare bones, so they're focused on some basic services, nobody's going to have time to actually be having any vision for the future. And then we're going to be in as bad or worse position next year and the year after that, and just watching things crumble. So this is what I'm struggling with. So, I mean, personally, I would be very open if people have ideas to, if there's specific projects or something. I personally am not interested in looking at any further staff reductions. I think it's just going to I think that's going to have an impact. I think the cuts proposed are already going to be putting more work on the same number of people, which cuts morale, which cuts efficiency, health of our employees. So I have very minimal interest in that. But I think, if people see places where we put a project that we thought was a priority off for a year or something. Like, that's the kind of thing I would be open to, but I also think we do need to be having enough flexibility to be looking at the systems, or we're just going to keep being in this position year after year.
Tim, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just thinking.
Don't feel you need to say something if you don't want to.
I just want to be nice, Jack. I don't say mean things. I don't know. It seems like part of the conundrum is our strategic planning process when we get to this point, and it's that piece that several council members have expressed concern as we've gone through it the last few years. Is it doesn't really set priorities. It's just this very long list of bullets. And this is a time when we're trying to bring it in and determine what's important to us and what's less important. You know, I mean, not every service we provide is essential for a community of our size, and we provide a lot of good services to people. But it's okay to review that and determine when we're over the top. So when we get to a point like this, we can make adjustments. So I think that piece, that's kind of a weakness when we get to this place today from that process, which I think it really needs to change. I don't think keeping going with the same template you've been using is productive, and I don't think it gives us a good result when we get to this place. I know you've quoted the strategic plan in several places in the budget process, and every time I read it, I cringe, because it doesn't feel like it really did for me what I wanted it to do.
However, it is the strategic plan that the council all deliberated and voted on.
Because every year you go through this long process and you get there and you say, sure, let's just move on. I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sal, were you about to say something? Well, because you don't have to again.
No, I'm just thinking, you know, my mailbox is full of people saying, you know, pave, keep the police, keep the fire, public safety, public works. And that's because there's potholes, and there's crime, and there's fires, and there's people who need medical attention. So when people lose those services, when they hit a pothole, they say, oh, you know, we need to pave. When they lose other services, they change their mind. I mean, at the precipice we change, right? I don't know if you're a science fiction fan, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Anyway. I mean, I'm not trying to oversimplify it. I just think the hue and cry is that we need to keep those basic core services and cut elsewhere. And what people aren't saying is, and reduce services elsewhere, but that's what it amounts to. And when they experience that, my mailbox may change. But until then, I don't think it will.
I think this might be a good point to open the floor to comments from the public. We have people in the room. I don't know if anyone in the room wants to be recognized. And we have people listening in on Zoom, and I see at least one hand up on Zoom. Steve, you made it to the podium first, so you're up.
I'm going to, maybe at the risk of repeating a few things I said last week, it's more than the 400-something thousand, because the gimmicks that were employed, shifting stuff to the downtown improvement district tax, raising the ambulance rates, and apparently that didn't even come before council. It was just a decision, we're going to increase these rates to our public safety ambulance partners and or billing, to shift the community fund out of the budget to the ballot. It's still, you know, it's going to pass because it's all the nonprofits that we've shifted government work to. So that's just another gimmick. So if you take those gimmicks away, and I think there was another one too, but I don't remember it. You take those gimmicks away, there's over $1 million that needs to be cut to stay within your target rate. Nobody has spoken about dispatch. We shoulder a huge, we bring in a lot of revenue, but we also pay a whole lot for our dispatch operation. And it was greedy monopoly behavior, mismanagement, that caused us to put the Public Safety Authority out of business. That's a bigger problem. That's a community-wide problem, a county-wide problem that the state is wrestling with in funding sources. But we've done nothing but shoulder the cost ourselves and raise the rates unilaterally on our dispatch customers. But when we're staffing a homelessness task force, you know, a city staffer at $174,000, you know, that's insane, you know, to put that level, that salaried person, that salary and benefits projected for, you know, our city manager, hopefully close to retirement, is costing us $231. You know, our facilities manager did not get the district heat into the black, and he's mostly changing light bulbs. You know, if you read his reports, how many $100,000 employees does it take to change LED light bulbs? You know, can we afford $100,000 for a communications, a PR person? You know, $160,000 for a planning director that can't read the statute or the growth center requirements. You got real fat and dysfunction in the administration here, and I don't know how you're going to grow the will to start to clean it out, but we can't afford it. And I have shared a link, Carrie, with you, which you're free to share, which shows 3 years salary and benefits of every employee in the city.
Thank you. Dave Bellini.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Oh, hi. Great discussion, everybody. Dave Bellini from the corner of Liberty and Loomis. I think you guys are dancing around the issue. You have to look at necessary versus nice to have. I've said this before. I don't want to sound like a broken record. But if we lose a fireman, you know, they save lives. If we lose a policeman, it's important, public works. But, I mean, you've got communications positions that, frankly, under the current, with the taxes we pay, don't pass the straight face test. That's nothing against them. But how much of a service loss would it be if we got emails from Bill Frazier instead of from a professional writer? We managed fine for 50 years. I opposed them when they came into state government after I retired. I mean, that's what managers do. They write email. Don't forget, we only have 8,000 people in this town. We don't need communication specialists, and your director fat, and I looked into community services, whatever you call it, agency. I mean, what do you got, 20 people and 5 directors? Yeah, nobody wants to lay off personnel. I've been in government my entire adult life. I've been through budgets that would make you scream. You have no idea what a tough budget year is. You know, I've gotten pink slips myself. I've had jobs eliminated. Nobody wants to do it. But sometimes it takes leadership and real management to just go in there and say, this is what we're going to have to do. And the taxes are outrageous, and you have to put yourself in the taxpayer's place. And I'm fed up with the taxes. Last year, taxpayers got kicked in the teeth. Enough. Keep it to the rate of inflation or the CPI. You're in the 3s, you know. I probably won't come down and bang on the microphone. But come on, guys, get real. I mean, this is a small corner store that you're managing here. You know, this isn't Walmart or something. And it makes me mad that, you know, you keep saying police and fire. What if we have to cut them? Well, that's where people aren't going to want to do it. I don't know how else to say it. I think you've got positions that they're probably great people. Nobody wants to do it, but you have to get the tax rate down. It's just that simple. When John Holler was mayor, you had 10 less positions. Did city government function? It sure did. There you go. There's a starting place. That's it.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay.
I don't see any other hands raised in the Zoom box. I'll give people some time. Is there anyone else in the room who'd like to be heard? While we're waiting, I'll just see what things look like in Zoom land. All right, we do have 2 public hearings scheduled for next month, and I hope and expect that we'll have plenty of opportunity to hear from people. So council members, there we are. We have a proposed budget at the level that it's set for. We have this tool that we can say, well, okay, we're going to analyze the cost impacts, the tax impacts of any change we can possibly imagine. So, Mr. Bellini, if you have jobs that you think should be cut out, you have the ability to go through the budget with that tool and see how they would pay off. Any of us have the ability to do that same thing here, and I'm sure that will. I assume we'll be seeing some of that in the upcoming meetings. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything or wants to keep this discussion going beyond where we are now? Do you want anything else from the council at this point?
Well, so I would say that first thing, we'll get out that info, the staff information. We usually put that in the budget. I don't know, we must have missed it this year. So we'll get that out to you ASAP. We're happy to take a look at getting to, 3.5 or something like that. And I wouldn't say happy about it, but I guess the question, I'm going to try it one more time. So I appreciate the tension, and I'm trying to have us working together on this. You are elected to set the priorities for the community, and I want to make sure that what we're proposing reflects your priorities. It's that simple. We got your message loud and clear. Didn't touch police, fire, and public works. In fact, but hey, we got your message loud and clear. Increase the capital plan. So if we're staying with what's left, there could be some pretty dire consequences to some of the things that we do. And I just want to make sure we're doing that with eyes wide open. And there will be operational effectiveness issues. I'm certainly happy to look at, some sort of consulting. It'd be great to look at internal operations. I don't think we're going to do it between now and January 22nd, but certainly is always a good idea to take another look at that. We just really haven't had the money for it. So, we'll talk. We'll see what we come up with. Maybe I can ship some ideas out to you or whatever. But and then we'll come back on the 8th and see where we get.
Part of it is we're faced with the conditions on the ground that we're faced with. We have the number of miles we have of road and sidewalk to be paved, and I noticed either on Facebook or in the last couple of days or Front Porch Forum, people were complaining about whether we're getting the sidewalks plowed enough, and people rely on that. And I saw someone suggested, well, we should have an ordinance that says people have to shovel their own sidewalks. And people need to realize that there's a difference between saying the law is going to say people have to do something and having that actually happen. And if you want to take the amount of time we're spending on plowing sidewalks and spend it on giving tickets to people who didn't shovel their sidewalks, well, I guess we could do that. But we've got a certain number of miles of road we have to plow. We have a certain number of acres of grass that need to be mowed, and maybe we can do it every other week instead of once a week. And there are things we can do. I know the proposed budget includes consolidating functions, so having people split time between Public Works and Parks and Rec for the very purpose of being more efficient. But everything is on the table, or everything can be on the table, because that's how the tool works. And if we have nothing more, I'll close out this item of the agenda. It's not easy. I've been through this many times, and this is the hardest time. We're up to item 9A. A motion is in order from somebody, from Councillor Gill, probably.
So my motion is, I move to find that the premature general public knowledge regarding the council's review of the city manager's contract would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage because the council, as the employer, otherwise has no opportunity to review and evaluate the terms of the contract without the risk of disclosing its negotiation strategy. I move that we, City Council, enter into executive session to discuss the town contract with the city manager under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1A, and Section 3 of the Vermont statutes.
That has to be actually broken into two separate
Okay.
motions. The first thing is we have to make that finding.
Okay.
So why don't we take that motion first?
Okay.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's passed unanimously. Now, the second part is your motion to go into executive session.
Okay. I move that we, City Council, enter into executive session to discuss the town's contract with the city manager under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1A, and Section 3 of the Vermont statutes.
And to be clear, the statute allows us to determine who will go into executive session. Does your motion include having the city manager be present in the executive session?
No, it's just City Council.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? If you're ready for a vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we are going into executive session and call our meeting back to order. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we are out of executive session. Next item on the agenda is city council reports. Start with Councillor Hurl.
Great. Just briefly, just wanted to, I know, I think every councillor has held public forums recently, and just wanted to thank everyone. I know we've had lots of good attendance and participation, getting lots of emails, so just grateful for everyone for taking time to make their voices heard. One of the things that a lot of the kind of ideas and perspectives have come out in the conversation at the forum that Adrian and I held this past weekend. There was a lot of thoughts and input on the budget survey, so we might try to provide some input on kind of how we're gathering input that way. So we can follow up on that separately. But other than that, just happy holidays and happy New Year, everyone.
I have an update about youth committee, and tomorrow they are meeting at their school to decide for their committee chair and the monthly meeting dates. And I really want to thank Montpelier High School Flexible Pathway Director Matt because you are in the school and we are here. Okay, thank you. So he is creating a bridge of communication between the city and the youth because it is kind of challenging for me to find the kids. So I really appreciate that. So soon we will put the dates and the names and everything on our website, and I am very excited to attend their meetings and hear their ideas. All the things we have been discussing, like strategic plan, budget, all the future initiatives they wanna have. So I just wanna thank you again, all the city councilors and city manager and city staff supporting this idea. And happy holidays.
Just happy holidays, everyone. Enjoy it.
Sal?
I just want to say that I appreciate all the effort that the staff puts into this budgeting process. I really do try not to ask the same question twice. I appreciate the time and effort that it takes to put up with my questions, and the answers are always extremely useful, not only to me but to the people who ask me about that stuff. So thank you, everyone who helps with that, and happy holidays.
I also want to thank the staff for the incredible work that you've done and the sacrifices that people are making, and recognizing that people are going to be losing their jobs and people are going to be having more work to do, and it's a lot to ask, or a lot to demand. And we've been talking a lot about health insurance as being one of the major drivers of this, and I just wonder if maybe our legislative committee would like to reconvene and talk about adding an item, because that everybody's dealing with this. Every municipality, every employer, but is dealing with this incredible increases in health insurance. And if we had a different system of healthcare that didn't rely on insurance companies taking so much money out of the system, we'd have a lot more available for people to have in their pockets and for people to get good health care. So that's all.
Thanks, Harry. Adrian?
Everyone said everything. Thank you, Lauren, for reporting on our District 1 meeting, and thank you to the staff. I also try not to duplicate questions, so it was nice to see what Sal asked, so I deleted all of my questions that he asked, so hopefully we'll save you time. This is my first budget season, so I'm just trying to not burden with too many questions, so thank you all for your time, and I hope everyone has an opportunity to take a few days off to spend with your family over the holidays. So thank you all so much.
Thanks. Mayor's report, I will agree. I think that our city staff, top to bottom, do a great job, are very responsive to the needs of the city and to the requests for information that they receive, and I appreciate all the work you do. Seriously mean that, and obviously it's long hours dealing with very complicated stuff, and as a number of people on this council have mentioned, well, we don't know how all this, every department works to the level of detail that you do, and so we definitely rely on the expertise of our departments and department heads, and I think that that reliance is well-founded. I feel like I could say this every week, and I don't say this every week, but once again, there's been another mass shooting brought about by a young teenager who got her hands on a gun and whatever else laid up to it. If she couldn't get her hands on that gun because of all the guns around the country, it would not have happened, and so we got to do something about that. I guess I can say happy holidays after that, although it's that's where we are. City clerk's report.
No report.
City manager's report.
Just have two things. Three things. One is, you mentioned the legislative committee. We got a proposal from our lobbyist to continue. We cut it out of the budget in this current year, but the price dropped substantially from $15,000 to $5,000. So technically, that's within my authority to approve, but I don't think, given that we chose to take it out of the budget. So I guess the question is if we think we might want to engage her at that price to continue doing that work, and particularly, I think, if we're going to look at health insurance, I don't know, and funding to assist with homelessness, and as well as funding for the Country Club Road project. So those would be our three big priorities, but I just throw that out. On the other hand, you should go down that slope, right, if we cut it and we can start putting everything else back, so.
Lauren?
I definitely support it if you can find the money. Just as somebody who spends a lot of time up at the State House, if you're not up there all the time with a specific agenda on your mind that you're working day in, day out, like we tried for years to not hire a lobbyist, and we didn't get the things on our legislative agenda, and then we did, and we saw the return on it. So I think it's money well spent, as long as we've got concrete things that we want to get, which I think this is another year where we have clear goals that will benefit the city and taxpayers. So I support it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend us do it, especially if we end up keeping that in the budget for next year as well, then we'd have the continuity. But I also, because it was a specific budget cut last year, I felt like we should at least flag it publicly before we just go ahead and do it.
So just to be clear, this isn't on the agenda for tonight. Why don't we put it on the agenda for next?
I mean.
Oh. What do people? I'm just wondering whether we need to have it on the agenda.
I guess that's the question. Would you like it on the agenda for discussion, or like I said, I could technically just go do it, but I wouldn't do it. I didn't want to do it without talking to you all in public about doing it. And if people would like to have it as a future agenda item, we can do that.
Do people feel like a straw poll, just saying yes, we think it's a good idea, or do you want it on the agenda? I think we definitely should do it. It paid way more than what we spent last time. Tim?
Yeah, I guess I would support it, and maybe I'll recommend taking it out someday, but put it back in and we'll work with it.
Okay.
All right, great.
Okay, second one was just, I don't know if any of you have been to South Burlington lately, into their new downtown, that they're building. Kelly and I had to go to a training there yesterday at the City Hall, which is, by the way, you talk about rebuilding, oh my God, a palatial building. It's really fabulous. But they had an area behind, is it Dorset Street, that had just been open for years. And they, in the 90s, said, we're going to create a new downtown here. And they've worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. And they had lots of pressure to put big box stores there. And they said no, they zoned it a certain way, and they used planning tools, zoning tools, official maps, and now they're building, like, there's just all these houses with retail, and like it's a whole, I don't want to say high rise, but they're probably 5 or 6 stories tall, and it's a whole, like, there's tons of them, and the streets go around, and it's built like a downtown, and it's really fabulous. And the real message there is they had a vision, and they resisted pressure, and they said, this is our long-term vision, and we're going to work at it and work at it and work at it till we get at it. And I think it's important to remember these things take a long time. I'm sure it took them 20, 25 years to get to where they are, but they never wavered from that was going to be their plan. And, I know that they got knocked down along the way, and the things that didn't go their way, but they've got what they want now. And I just, as we think about growing our community, we think about housing projects and those kind of things. If we have a vision that we're bought into, we just got to say this is where we're headed, and it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we need to move the ball forward constantly to get to where we want to go. So it's kind of inspiring. Both of us left saying, this is just really cool, knowing how long it had taken. And the third thing is happy holidays, everybody. I didn't want to be left out. That was my third. So that's all I have.
All right, folks, 10:34 p.m., and we are adjourned.